few technical difficulties. But I would ask Brent to do the Treaty 6 land acknowledgement, please.
We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, and we recognize all the many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and non-First Nations whose footsteps have marked these lands.
Thank you. And we will move on to 1.2, adoption of the agenda. Trudy. Trudy's made a motion to adopt the agenda. All those in favor? Thank you. 2.0 or number 2 is in camera. So motion to go in camera for legal and labor. Lori?
I would so move. We go in camera.
All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Jackie, let us know. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. As always, lots of detail and great information, so thank you very much, Jason. Was there anything that you wanted to speak of that isn't later on in the agenda, like your stage 2 reentry, that's on the agenda later?
No, I don't think I have anything specifically. I think there's a lot of good updates and information on a number of programs and developments. So, no, unless any questions from the board.
Great.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Sports in there was not recommended for fall, but do you know what they're
Yeah, so we did receive some correspondence through the ASAA, the Alberta School Athletics Association, regarding that. The executive is meeting, will meet at a time when the final decisions made on reentry, the 3 scenarios, and then they will make recommendations on sports in general in schools. So hopefully that will happen prior to August 1st. That's the final day in which a decision will be made by government. So over the summer we'll have direction.
okay? Thanks. And then my other question was, if families aren't comfortable with in-person learning, are teachers responsible to do this? Like, how does their assignable time work when you're doing basically double duty?
Yeah, great question. So that actually flows into 5.13,
I think.
yeah, 1.3 on the reentry, and then also on the budget item on 1.5, 5.15. So if you're okay,
So yeah, Brent, I think any of the questions.
we'll address those at that time.
we're
Oh,
gonna be
yeah, okay,
discussing
yeah,
the
no
reentry,
problem.
so, I guess besides the reentry, was there any other questions? Because I'm sure there will be other reentry questions. Trudy?
I don't necessarily, it's not a question, but I just like to commend you and your team for all of the information that you have sent out, like the weekly and all of the links and all the things and the support for all the staff. I just think, wow, that's incredible. So they have absolutely no recourse on not knowing what's going on in Wolf Creek, because there's just a multitude of information out there. And kudos to all of you guys for doing it.
Thank you very mumuch, and I will absolutely pass that on to our
And
staff.
even that caught you doing something good and different things that the schools are doing, I just think, you know, I think brought everybody together. Difficult.
Thank you.
Kelly?
So I was just going to ask about the climate of the EAs and how's everybody feeling about life there and principals and support. Just that.
Yeah, certainly with the allocation of EAs, I mean, as a board, you absolutely prioritize that and made that a strong commitment in your budget deliberations. So when you look at the EA allocation and the decisions that have been made, it's really a good news story. As you know, that employee group was singled out with layoffs. So the good news is the majority of those EAs will return to our schools in September, which is fantastic. And I would also suggest that with the changes to the funding model, specifically with program unit funding and some of those shifts, as you can see, we have some changes there, but we've really prepared and staged well for September. And I think overall, there's a high level of support for our students who are EAs. yeah, and of course our EAs, because they have been off, we haven't necessarily been in touch with them as much as we have in the past, but we're absolutely looking forward to them returning in September.
Lori?
My question is for your last bullet there with that nonviolent crisis intervention, that was all the rage. That's Kevin Cameron stuff, right?
No, actually, that's a different
Is it?
model that we have had in place for quite some time, and this is a very different approach with students that are in need of very specialized support, and mainly around safety. So as you know, with students that sometimes are unable to maintain behavior and they become very challenging to handle, this training is providing a little bit more of a focus on proactive approach as compared to the nonviolent crisis, which is more how to address them when they're escalated to a high level
Restraining.
and restraint. It's more focused on what you do to not get to that place. So the training, actually, today and tomorrow, our whole inclusive learning services team is getting trained in this. We have 2 trainers that were trained in Wolf Creek to do this training. And our goal is, as you see in this information, is to now roll that training out with our staff and ensure that we have a consistent approach across the district. So it's going to take a lot of work and time next year to do that, but we're quite excited because it's a very well-established model, and I would suggest it's a model that is a little more proactive in the approach.
In the AER, our information, I mean, it looks all great except for orange, we got to be leery of, but there's only the one, and it's diploma exams participation. Is that because there was no?
Yeah, great question. So the information that Alberta Education releases at this time of the year in May is just updating on the survey questions, the 7 survey questions that were given in January, February to students, parents, and staff. So the information that's there on PATs, diplomas, all of that is actually last year's information. It's from last October. They include it, but it's not updated. So what will happen is when we get the actual final report in October, it'll have all of the information that you see here around the survey questions, but it will also have information on those other areas. Understanding though, that information is going to look very different because we don't have, obviously, diplomas and PATs running this time. But we do have diploma information, for example, from the January diploma exam. So there will be some information, but for the most part, the PAT data is not going to really be of value because we didn't do PATs.
Right, and participation used to be quite high.
Yes, so that information, and that's one thing that you will probably see when we present the information is there will be an asterisk or some kind of a qualifying statement around some of the data sets because they're incomplete and very different than they were in previous years. But even when you do look at the information that's here that we've highlighted in the bullets, those are the actual increases and numbers that we did see from our survey, and as you can see, very positive improvement in all of those areas, and we continue to improve.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions for Jason? No. All right. We will move on to 5.1, which is additions to the agenda. So one would be number 5.17, the board retreat dates. 5.18, the letter to, what's his name?
Kevin.
Kevin.
David Duck.
Chip Chura. Right?
Isn't it David Duck?
David Duck. David.
David Duck.
Okay, 5.19. Oh, no. That was the transportation survey. there.
ASBA questionnaire.
Is that what it was? ASB?
ASBA questionnaire regarding school reentry.
So 5.19. Yes. Is there any other additions to the agenda? So a motion to accept the agenda as amended, right? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. 5.2 is the minutes from our last meeting, which was May 21st. Lucy?
I move that the minutes from May 21st be accepted as presented.
All right, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. The next thing on the agenda is 5.3, which is the plan for retirement and recognition gala. However, it's 5 minutes to 12. So do you want to start discussing it now? We do have an appointment at 1 o'clock. We have to be back for lunch. Or would you like to break for lunch now and resume at 1:15? And we'd all have to be back here at
1:45.
to meet with our Edwin Parr recipient outside. Does that work for everyone? All right, so we will break for lunch until 12:45. But the meeting won't resume until just after 1, when,
Our presentation is complete.
yes. Exactly.
Is that how you spell Stephen and Stephen Preding? Or is it PH? I thought it was PH on the screen the other night.
All right, so we are going to move on to 5.3, which is the plan for retirement and recognition banquet. So, Jackie, do you, well, I guess first of all, there's a couple options. First one is to just move ahead, plan on moving ahead as is, as it has been in the past. But with COVID, we're not sure how that's going to work. I was doing some thinking about it. I think, Jackie, is there about 50 people receiving?
Not 50.
Not 50.
For what, retirees? or-
Yeah, retirees and
Didn't we
long
think 70
service.
kind of in total? What's the date?
October 20th. I just looked it up.
October 1st. October 1st.
I have October 20th.
Well,
You know,
Tuesday. Yeah, no, I have October Thursday.
Well, I guess I'll have to delete that.
October 20th is actually the end.
Edit, oh, that's really good.
Okay, so with moving ahead, like the LMC is a big building. However, with the rules on social distancing as it is now, you could have tables of 6, but only if those people are comfortable and cohort families or whatever it is they're going to be. So you could end up with tables of 1, tables of 2, which isn't going to work in the LMC. So I think it's really going to depend on the social distancing information. So,
But can't this decision be made after August 1st to see what to do?
Yeah.
What is the fact?
Lucy?
August 1st, you're going to be getting direction from the provincial government on how they expect schools to be open. But we're not going to know what stage 3 looks like until after August 1st, I would assume. And we have to decide whether we're going to just plan an in-person meeting because we have to cancel the LMC in adequate time. But I don't believe that waiting till August 1st is going to make our decision any different.
So,
I think we go ahead and plan an in-person meeting somewhere. If you don't want to do it at the LMC, I don't know what other facility.
that, I don't know that it's necessarily the LMC being the issue, it's just the social distancing part, right?
The LMC has not heard yet what their requirements are. They're so close.
Yeah.
They were gonna let me know as soon as they heard, but I have not heard from them, so they don't know what they're allowed or not allowed to do yet, I guess.
Lori?
Is the Long Score Saloon up on Stampede Hill, is that big enough?
I know I have a mayor's meeting next week to discuss, the Westerner and how they're planning on opening and when, and so that might have an impact on how the other municipalities are gonna follow suit, opening up their, facilities as well. I guess the question kind of is, if we think we would like an in-person, then as the time draws nearer, you could say, okay, it has to be theater seating, or it has to be, you know, like, I don't think even in October that you're gonna be allowed to have, buffet style eating services, so it might have to be something that doesn't actually have an eating, like a supper portion of the
Food.
presentation. So,
The one thing I talked to a caterer and they said it was, that buffet will likely be allowed, it's the
Oh.
serving,
yes,
that they would have to have extra staff to dish up their salad, so they're not everybody's touching the utensils.
Yeah.
Another option is to do something online, there's an option of just sending them a gift certificate. I thought about, and I was just kind of grasping it, you know, trying to think of other ways that would make it work. If we took the budget from what we have and separated it and gave them a higher value gift card for a local restaurant or community, like I just don't know, it's so hard to know what's gonna happen.
Can they not still order their gifts?
Yeah.
And then just to give part of that portion for the honorees for long service, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is if we weren't gonna do anything, not if we can't, like, we have to find a way to, we should have a plan B, I guess. If plan A is plan it in person at the LMC.
We should get lots of people, because they won't be able to travel.
Yeah. Lucy?
well, and again, you gotta, if our plan A is in person, at this point, we can have 50 people inside.
Oh, yeah, 50.
50 inside and 100 outside.
Yeah.
And so I would assume stage 3, they would maybe, let's say, double it, you'd have 100. So regardless, whatever that government recommendation is as far as gathering numbers, if it's 60, then I mean, only 60 can attend, and that's just the way it is, right? And so we would just have to adhere to whatever recommendations are of that month. Because we could be in wave 2 and we could be back to stage 1.
Could we do it in 2 sessions, first the retirees and then second the long service? From 5 to 7 and 8 to 10 or something like that. Depending on the number of honorees that we will have. And adjust our maybe no banquet, but.
See, what I was thinking when you said the no banquets, that's what I was thinking. We have the money set aside. Not we have to spend it, but we'd always provide a meal. And so I thought, well, if you give a gift certificate enough that they can go for supper, at whatever restaurant, whether they had choices depending where they lived or something. But I don't know if that's because a plate. What was it? About $15 a plate.
25.
25. And Kelly, is your hand up?
I just think it's important to do something in person, and so we should just plan it and take the final plans in September. When we do that.
Lori?
I agree with Kelly. I think we need to make plans to move ahead in person. It's not about the money in the gift card, it's about honoring these people that have given of their life to work for Wolf Creek, right? It's that personal thank you.
Lucy?
I'd agree with what the two ladies just said, that I think it's important to do it in person. And then I guess I would just suggest that a plan B be very similar to the Edwin Park.
Mhm.
I mean, we can still find a way virtually if we have to, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
And-
The Edwin Park went really well.
Right.
Do we need a motion? Because we already have a motion to do the banquet, right?
Yeah.
So nothing's changed, so I think.
So I guess the contingency plan is an online.
we make that motion.
So I move that the contingency plan for the retirement and recognition banquet be a online celebration.
Is there any more discussion?
I just wanted to know, when's the latest we could cancel the LMC?
You don't know, because I haven't heard from them yet.
Yeah.
They aren't open.
Right?
They're not open, caterers aren't open, so I can't book caterer yet, so.
Okay, so we have time to cancel it.
Okay, so all those in favor of Lucy's motion? Thank you.
I have a question with regards to the banquet, though, and the honoring of the people. Nobody knows how many years they've worked for us,
That happens every week.
which baffles me. I don't understand,
How can they not know?
right? So so far, the 4 people that say they're at, the milestone years of 25, 30, yeah, no, they're not. When I go back and check. So I don't know how you want to handle that. What do you want to do? I had a thought that maybe we just give the gift certificates for the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, those increments, and when they retire, you bump their retirement gifts by the amount of money, the $50 for the long service, bump up their retirement gift amount by that money. And then we have an actual number of what their years of service were. Or I can just go by what they say.
Well, we had that discussion, yeah, and then it's just to follow through when they come back 2 years later and say, you know what, I actually am 30 years this year, so make sure that they've already gotten it 2 years ago. And a lot of and I think you said it was mostly the ladies because of maternity leave.
So the men this
What was the men this time?
the men this time.
Because they don't have a lady.
But then Roger's right, the ladies do too, because when they go on maternity leave, they can buy back their ATRF when they're gone that year, but we don't recognize them as, because they weren't working that year. They were
Right.
off the leave, right?
Kelly?
Well, I think this is a Tetris situation, because the last thing you want to do is honor somebody for something, but mathematically speaking, everybody might not know how we see it. If I started here in 99 and I quit in 2000, regardless what I did, or 2020, mathematically speaking, it's easy to figure that out. But if I took a maternity or sick leave, right, I don't think everybody gets
There's
the
criteria.
details of that. So I think
The
we have
criteria is listed though.
we have to verify what we're doing, right? And I know that's a job for somebody. But I still think we need to do that and just hand out the pins correctly, right? That's my solution.
Did you get upset?
Yeah, of course.
Did we have this conversation last year? Because it's based on FTE as well, right? So there's a lot of different criteria.
I think you took the FTE base away.
Okay,
Took
good,
that away.
right? So that should make it a little easier.
They still don't know.
Okay, but so all the criteria is laid out.
Yep.
We've taken out the FTE.
Yep.
And then I guess it's just a matter of keeping some kind of track.
Right, and then
Isn't there a file for each, like, when I worked at Terrace Ridge, we had a file that had all the letters and when they started and whatnot. They should have access to those that we could go to.
Who has that?
The principal. I don't know.
Well, then that's how Jackie's doing the double check, is pulling the file and going through, okay, well, they had 2 mat leaves, or this person took a year's leave of absence, and that could be the males as well. Or this guy just doesn't know how to add, like.
I mean,
But they also will do things like I started as a sub in this year,
Oh,
but I didn't actually get a actually permanent
Contract.
position until, but they're going back to year they sub, so it's, those kind of things are going to happen, I guess, that might have to be checked.
ATRS statement has the exact number, correct?
The exact number, if they buy back maternity leave,
So it wouldn't necessarily reflect years of service, it's just how
that
much
we
they
use
have.
are.
Lori,
no, mine was, I said there must be an employment file on these people within the system that you could check, right? So to hire somebody. That was all. Brent asked my question.
so currently, Jackie, do they just once a year submit, say I've been there 5 years, 10 years, or do you track?
I send the form out each year,
Okay,
right? And we just started doing that, right? Because in the past, it was the people services department that would send that out. And the secretaries in school land would just add a year to everybody. No matter what.
because
And then it ended up this way.
We need to figure out the intent of why we're doing this, because nobody needs to make work project on
No,
how many, splitting hairs, right? And we just need to come up with what we're trying to do. And I do kind of, after the discussion, I kind of like Jackie's thing is, we'll just figure it all out in the end on our own.
I just
Within reason of 5,
Yeah.
10, right? Because if I went on maternity leave, I've been here 5 years before I'm 4, and I stay here for another 20 years, and at the end, it all works out in the wash, right?
yeah,
And that's sort of how I feel. I don't know that somebody should have to investigate a whole bunch if you're sending it to them, but then they fill it out and say that I've been there 5 years, or they don't fill it out. It sort of is what it is, because I'm sure that it's not that pin, you know what I mean? It's not like they're getting a trip to Hawaii.
or a real gemstone in that pin. Let's trust people's honesty, integrity as well.
Because I don't know that anybody would do it to be professionals.
No, so look at my pin.
No, it's their perception of truth, right? It's what they believe.
Yeah. So would we like Jackie to just continue sending it out every year, and whoever submits their information for how long they've been there? I don't want to make more work for her.
No.
Well, I want to know what you wanted, how you want to handle the long service. Do you want me to just take them at face value? Do you want me just to, and then it gets figured out in the wash at the end, or? Because I can do that. I mean, that's easy. I don't have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion that we distribute pins at face value as people provide information on the forms, and then figure out the real number when they retire. That way you only have, right? That's less work, Jackie?
Well, it's the hurt feelings in between. So my perception of truth, right? I don't know. This is a tricky. This is a tricky. Thanks, Jackie.
Sorry.
I love you. Love you. But how much time does it take to investigate the reality of
Number.
we're talking probably days. Of
No,
principal
not
going in.
days. I'm also looking at it from a dollar value as well, right?
Right,
I'm thinking, well, really, they're not
right.
eligible for this one.
Yes.
Why are we, how many times do we have to tell them how many years they've had?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at, they got it maybe 2 years before they should have, but they might quit in that meantime and actually not get it. I guess you've also got a situation where the person says, well, I got 30 years. And then when they retire, it's actually 28 years. They're going, you told me I was okay with 30 years 2 years ago. Why am I not doing it now?
That's why I might have to vote against that motion because it's the details and
The accuracy, yeah.
the accuracy, and I perceive things different because I probably forgot about my sick day and all the reasons I've taken time off work because that's out of my mind, that it's not out of reality, right? And
The record.
So I would have to say we need to figure it out. With all due respect, people figured it out. With love and admiration for people to figure it out because of the accuracy.
Yeah.
Because we figure out lots of things in school boards, right? You figure out all kinds of fun things for me. So I'll vote against the motion with love.
Oh, I'm fine.
I was just going to say there are hurt feelings when Jack goes back to them, and that doesn't reflect well on the board either. When that kind of thing happens, but she gives them the rules and says, this is how we calculate this. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is, and they go with it. But there's also, I think, the ability in the HR system potentially maybe start tracking this a little better. But it's also somebody's time and services.
Well, I'm just wondering if we could have a baseline starting tomorrow. But, to have that capability and to have that, so it wouldn't be, maybe it might be difficult to do it at first, but then you have that baseline so that you know how many years people have worked. Like we can track hours for teachers, so we should be able to track years for employees, shouldn't we?
So what's your thoughts on that if you actually had, I mean, we had started that process at one point in time to actually come up with that, but it was a lot.
Time consuming.
It's a lot of work to go through those files, each file individually,
Yeah.
and figure out their years and get them into something.
But could it be
But it-
set starting with the employees from this point to this point, or starting into this year, so that we actually have new employees that have started in 15 years down the road, we'll have the right numbers on those employees. The other ones will just have to go.
Yeah, I think that there's capabilities in the HR module to calculate that, as you're saying. Whatever they said in the HR module. The other thing with ATRF, Jason, is what you said, is that not every teacher has spent their full career with us. So the ATRF will tell them they're at 20 years, but really maybe it's only 10 with us and 10 with another
True, yeah.
division.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that we can get that in. We still have to go back to their files.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. Good points.
Well, that's quick giving the damn award then.
Lucy and Lori.
I agree with Trudy that perhaps like a baseline or something would be a good idea. I know that I have had a comment from 2 different teachers over the last couple of years saying, how come you guys don't know how long I've worked here? I mean, that much to you that you don't even know how long I worked here? Well, no, obviously we don't. And it's not as straightforward, but right. But so I think some of those hurt feelings are like, why do you ask me every year how long I've been here? Because there's quite a
See, and there's
process.
the problem is that they were asked every year. It's just that the secretary at the school was filling it in for everybody. They didn't get asked, but the secretary would fill it in for everybody. So the question has been asked every time, ever since they started. They just didn't know it was being asked.
Right, that makes good sense. That makes good sense.
So we could send it, maybe try and send it back to the secretaries to do.
Right.
If we could, why are you shaking your head?
So I don't know if, in fairness to them, the accuracy of that information would not necessarily be guaranteed coming from them based on what's happened in the past.
Yeah.
So I think the only accurate way of calculating is unfortunately probably manually through the personnel file. That's the only way that I think we would have any ability to accurately.
Summer students.
Yeah, now that I made the motion, Roger's point about the accuracy, if we give them their 25-year pin and then they are 28 and then they retire thinking they have 30 years, you think there'll be unhappy people when you don't give them a pin for how many years they think you have. Okay. Right? How something so simple is so complicated. It's just a nice gesture, that's all. No, you're just an accurate person, Jackie, trying to do things right.
So there is a motion on the floor.
There is. Can we make it, fix it how you friendly, no, it has to be defeated, I'll vote for it, because I made it.
Just because you make the motion doesn't mean it.
So all those in favor of Lori's motion? And opposed? There, defeated.
Okay, Kelly.
Solutions.
Could we ask Jackie and Roger to see, could we ask Jason to ask Jackie and Roger to see if there's a way to figure this out a little bit easier? And advise us on the best way to come up with the numbers?
To investigate how we might do that, it might not be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might be HR services or. There's lots of different, potentially different ways to do it.
So currently, the long service people at 20 and 25 years, 25, 30, they receive a gift.
Yes.
Right? So you're also buying direction to stop those gifts, stay with the pin, and then add that long service award gift money to the retirement. Is that right? Yeah.
I think we need to not give out well, first of all, are we making a mountain out of a molehill? How many people are offended and are we accurate 80% of the time? Are we not perfect, but we're generally good? You know?
Usually like 4 or 5, it's not like
Every year.
probably.
And now that we've left it in their hands to fill in the form, it's not as, because not everybody's filling in the form. Yeah. So then we went into that problem.
So what?
So I think last year, if memory serves me correct, there were 500 and some that filled in the form. And this year, I think there was like the high 380 coming to mind. Filled in the form.
We make a motion to discontinue handing out long service pins, and we can do something globally, say something. So that's I think the motion is to not hand out long service pins, and we will do a video globally saying we thank you for 5 years for serving rather than individually each hand. You know, increments. That way it's not specific to you, it's thank you for long service.
And I don't agree with that because I think that for 5 people out of the employees of 1,000, screw up this whole process is too politically correct.
Guess we're gonna vote against that one. This is like the French, right? Oh, no,
No, I just don't agree that those few people can mess it up for all of our good employees that have worked hard
I would like a pin.
and would like, they really appreciate that. And appreciate.
Can I change my motion to continue doing what we're doing and put it on the onus of the employee
Jason.
to fill it out right?
And swear in front of our justice of the peace. Correct.
Right, but if we have them fill it out rightly and you don't fill it out, then you don't, and then you fill it out. Okay. That's my motion. Do you like that? Lucy, do you know what I wrote, what I said?
To continue
Just
with
continue
the onus on the employee.
with the responsibility on them.
So the employees now, the 10, 15, 20s are getting $25 gift certificates.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Just long service awards we have to address.
I could just not, I mean, I'm feeling bad that I even brought it up now.
Oh, it's a good discussion.
So we just continue over.
Lucy, did you have a comment?
I was just wondering if Kelly would be open to a friendly amendment to indicate to do, our 5, 10, 15, 20, how we've been doing it. The onus is on the responsibility of the employee. And that long service awards though do roll into the retirement, because I think that's where our biggest problem is at that back end.
Here,
That's friendly.
yeah,
Jackie will make it friendly.
So just to clarify, are the 25, 35, those ones gonna get the $25 gift certificate as well?
what,
Yes.
Yes.
So everybody from 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, increments of 5, they get a $25 gift certificate. And the gift would happen at the end when they retire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that gonna change our budget? Before I vote on that.
But we already had that.
It'll be less, because
I'm not sure that we can make that change for this year.
No.
yeah,
Because we have to take.
Forum's already went out.
evaluating this year, but maybe that's the change for the 2021 year.
so does that mean then whenever they retire after 25 years, or 30, or 26 years, or whatever, they will get a retirement gift, but not a 25 years service. Is that,
But what I would do is with the awards company for next year, I would say we're gonna get rid of the long service gifts. So take that money that we would have spent on that and pop it forward.
that's what she suggested in the beginning, 40 minutes ago.
All right. So,
FYI.
So,
Jackie, you have the motion there, is it clear? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of
Did
the
you read it? What's the motion again? Sorry.
Jackie, you want to read the motion?
This is Kelly's motion, is that we, because there was a friendly amendment. Employees receive the $25 gift certificate for the 10, 15, 20 increments of 5. And then receive the retirement gift at the end
When they retire.
with their actual years in.
All right, so now you're ready?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. That took a while.
That's a big one.
Next one.
hardly wait for this one.
All right. 5.4 is the board boundary review options. So what we had planned here, as far as the board review, was to pick
3.
3 options to investigate closer and make a decision at a future meeting regarding what options best. So the information was sent out, showing the different options. So I think first I'd like a motion of the options that you like, and then you could take it from there. So we're supposed to be picking three trustees and three.
So,
No,
so they have 3 of each.
They have three.
I just was hoping, and you don't have to narrow it down, we can have full discussion at the board retreat. But the hope was that we could narrow it down to
Three.
3, 2
Maximum.
or 3, or
Right.
4, or just narrow it down, I guess is the hope.
Lori,
I'd like to narrow, one of them would be configuration 4 for me to take to the retreat.
And if I could add to Lori's motion, I would like to see configuration 2 brought forward.
2, 4, and we need 1 now.
No, I don't.
Oh,
So those are the ones that I've looked at the hardest, is 2 and 4. So those are on my page with some modifications, but that doesn't matter, right now. This 2 is with 6 trustees, 4 is with 7 trustees, correct?
mhm.
If I may, I think Roger has pro and con list that we can ask Roger to share.
You sent it to us. Yeah, he did.
Oh, did he? Not on email. Okay, still on.
I know, that's why I bring 2 increases.
And that's my pros and cons, not necessarily your pros and cons.
But at least you gave us something to work from.
You can all, like the options where they have Black Falls as their own board.
Yeah.
At some point down the road, if their growth rate remains the same, it's gonna skew the
Numbers.
They're gonna be over there, and he shows that there, that even in 2026, but if they are their own board, then it's easy enough to add a trustee. So, but if you had 7 trustees, you're adding 8. If you had 6, then you're adding 7. So at some point down the road, but as I also we've been on the wrong side of the median for a number of years now, so it's not like anybody truly complains about it, aside from the fact that Black Falls has brought that forward a few times. So if they have the representation, they may not have any concerns, even if the population continues to grow the way it is for a while. Especially as the board has been very generous in recent years anyways.
Yeah, and this board's always been very Wolf Creek minded, like it's never division or ward specific. I don't just look after the needs of Ward 5, I look after all the needs, right?
Yeah.
But that's who we've always been, that doesn't necessarily mean it's who we always will be, right? I don't know, are you guys good with just limiting down to Ward 1 and 2? 2 and 4, sorry.
2 and 4
I don't-
options.
We should maybe,
Lucy,
Yeah, and I mean, we had this conversation kind of before, that a technique could be to exclude, you know, some of our choices, because if you look at configuration 1, that's, you know, not conducive to the municipal voting boundaries, which makes it very difficult when then you call a school election as well,
Yeah.
because the voters are unclear.
Yeah.
So configuration 1 is not very good. Also, configuration 3 is not conducive to that. And I think those were the only 2.
4 is not either,
4 is not.
except it's right down the 3 and 4 for Macomb County. I think it is on the, it looks like it's on the line for Anoka County Division, but it's for the division. But it looks like it's coming down, splitting Macomb and Black Falls.
Oh,
And it
shoot.
may be along to, like, you could probably do it that long to A
Yes.
or
if you
number
do
2,
it
whichever way you wanted to do
clear.
it. Like, you might be able to do that fairly easily so that when they are coming, because what Lucy's referring to is when a person comes in to vote.
Yeah.
And there's no clear, like, I'm in Division 1 for Cook County.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for the person that's actually, they have to look up each land location and determine where they're at. So if you could actually say, I'm in Division 1, they say, well, you vote for this board. So, but if you had a line, and he mentions that in some of his others, like the first, number 1, Round Ruby, I think.
If there is a division as to where to vote, like close to home, or go all the way up to Bluffton. And so people don't vote there.
Exactly.
Because why would they, right?
well, and you could run into, you know, having a polling station where there's, do you vote for school trustee? Yes, and then, well, where do you live? And, oh, well, you know, because it could, you know, it really, like you said, it'll skew, like, oh, well, you need a ballot for Ward 6 or 5. And it could be all at one polling station.
And I'm not sure what would sort of, I'm not sure what would happen if, and I've been thinking about David, if you just pull Black Wells up in current configuration. Pretty sure you probably looked at that and probably found it like equitable at this point. I don't want to throw more in.
Yeah, that might be a good one though.
Really, he said it wasn't going to work when we asked him.
Yeah.
But Kelly and Lucy.
But that's what my option I was starting to come up with. Until I thought option number 4 was, because I want to talk about dividing other lines, right? If we divide, keep divisions 3 and 4 Macomb County together, that puts the population stronger for the Macomb trustees and keeps the population down. But Black Falls is all the options in all of this, Black Falls is on.
And I think it's just, you found it very difficult to.
Black Falls anyway.
Well, there was some, the ones where you had either the line going around Macomb one way or around Black Falls the other way, so it would actually be, I guess, similar to what you have now, where the Macomb and Black Falls are part of a bit of the county, but they would actually be more, they would have a lot of county in each one of those, one of the 2 of them, I think, 7, 5 and 6. And he just reversed how he was.
But
which board did.
I'd like to see on paper what it would look like if we left the boundaries very similar to as they are with Black Falls, the city of Black Falls, the town of Black Falls. I'd like to see what
With the new trustee.
the new trustees, 7 trustees. So 7 trustees with Black Falls as this Ward 6, only in the town.
it still left mine and Lucy's, really low.
I still
We
wanna
don't
see
have
it.
it, yeah, but we, then that's what the reason that we didn't have enough population, with doing that, that was his reason. So,
Milestones.
yeah, no, that's fine.
What is it?
Your hand? Nope. Lucy's hand.
Maybe, I can't remember.
So we have a motion for number 2 and 4, and then Kelly's also asking just to see the way it is exactly now with Black Falls and so on, so 7 trustees. So I guess if Jason could have someone work on that and just put that really nice map, for the, a nice map, like, well
Not
done.
like this.
That was nice, but different. So that would be that. Okay, and Laura, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, I just need clarity. Isn't configuration 5?
It pretty much are.
It isn't configuration 5 is kind of how it is with Black Falls on its own, 7 trustees. Is that, did I not figure that out?
No, 5 is, going around the cone, that does go.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay,
So we're gonna look at 2 and 4, plus the one recommended by Kelly is the motion right now. So,
I'm good with that.
you're okay with it? All right, so all those in favor of Kelly's motion, Lori's, or somebody, Lori's motion? Absolutely.
Lucy's addition. Yeah, I started it because I wanted 4.
Friendly amendment.
Good, thank you. 5.5 is we need to amend motion 61.20. There was just a range number put in correctly. Lori,
I'd so move. Amended to motion 6.1, 61.20 from Range Road 24-0 instead of 25-0.
all right. Was there any more questions or comments? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next, we're moving on to Zone 4 Friends of Education.
Well, I think that if we're going to have an in-person event, then they should be invited to attend that. And if we're not, then they should be invited to attend the virtual event.
I think this is your ASBA zone.
Oh, the AS, oh, I'm sorry.
Nomination.
Sorry. Yeah. So, when I read the agenda last night, I saw this on there, and they kind of like this Friends of Education Award for Zone 4 to affect all 8 boards in Zone 4. And it's hard to come up.
So in the past, there was Canyon Ski Hill one year.
I don't think they got it though. They were not. We nominated them, but they were not the recipient. I think that
Aspire Center, you know.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
they were. And I think somebody recommended the mustard seed, but that's Red Deer, not the other 8 boards. I thought about this last night as I turned up my light, and it's hard. I couldn't think of anything. Like I really tried.
I couldn't come up with.
Yeah. Jason, do you have any ideas for us? Like who's friends that we don't pay, that they help us? It's hard.
Is that called big brothers, and big sisters, I believe, was one.
They've been a recipient.
Yeah. I do know, just thinking off the top of my head, and I believe it's through FCSS and has supported for a long time a program that runs in a number of schools in Granville Notice, the Rainbows program. Evelyn Lockhart.
I think they got it one year.
Did they get it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
did.
already
Oh, okay.
nominated them.
Yeah,
Okay.
they
yeah.
did. I remember that one.
They got it for our kids.
Mm.
They were the recipient of the Wolf Creek Friends of Education.
Oh,
Oh, but we didn't nominate them for zone
So,
four.
but they were the recipient of the Wolf Creek Friends.
That's right.
Okay. And they just operate in Lacombe,
Yes,
or are they in other schools in Central Alberta?
it's just in Lacombe, but the zone 4 nominations for the Friends Award are by board motion. Boards may nominate an organization outside their own jurisdiction, but it's not really indicating that it has to be something, because we're not gonna find an organization really that's gonna encompass Rocky to Wetaskiwin,
Which one did you say was just in the cone?
Rainbows.
No, it's everywhere.
But,
Family has.
yeah, but Bentley's part of Lacombe,
Oh, gotcha.
FCSS. Lacombe,
Oh.
Clyde, Bentley is Lacombe, FCSS.
Right.
is there an oil company or something that works things
Yeah.
in our different jurisdictions?
Yes.
You know, because the guy, remember they put lights on the bus
Kiera.
here?
Kiera
Are they
Energy.
okay? Are they?
I think they're providing some scholarships for some of our schools out of the West Country. Echo Junior Senior High, for example.
I think they get my.
Yeah, you're right,
Oh, yeah,
you're right,
the bus.
Roger. So those two schools for sure.
Nova, I think, does a lot for the schools, don't they?
Trying to think of a full comp. like,
Maybe
thinking
it's
a little bit of-
right? And that's just it, right? It's-
Yeah. That's what it's.
Would they be in like Rocky or Drayton or?
And it is still Kiera. I got a Kiera service lease there. Change land time. It's Kiera.
Because I'm sure if they supported Wolf Creek, they would probably support someone else if they were.
Yeah.
Like at Gilney, because there's that Gilney gas plant that maybe.
Yeah, just did a search and actually Kiera supports a number of scholarships provincially. They actually provide one, it's on our website listed as an ongoing scholarship for Wolf Creek students. So I'll just find it here, sorry. It's called the Peter J. Renton Memorial Scholarship.
They operate outside of.
It looks like that one's offered outside as well. Just looking here.
Great West is also one that's just great. I don't think we give that out every year. So you can form.
So they have actually through Alberta Student Aid a scholarship that's $3,000. You could direct me to find out ways in which Kiera is currently sponsoring and supporting
When is this
schools,
due?
and I can gather that
We have
information.
lots of time, because they
We have
extended it, yeah.
So I can bring that back to you if that's. When
Not
is it?
just for Wolf Creek schools though. it's
Or no, I
for-
mean for ASBA, for the ASBA.
Kelly and Bonnie.
Does anybody know if Boston Pizza supports all over? Because I know Boston Pizza in Lacomb's amazing. I don't know if that's just
I think
because
the
the owners do it, or does all Boston Pizzas support? Because Boston Pizza was nominated by Lacombe Upper Elementary, and I know our one in Lacombe is good, but I don't know what Canopus does, or all the Boston Pizzas.
Right, because
in
I would
Lacombe.
hit Rocky and.
Everywhere
Red
there's
Deer?
Boston, right?
But that would be hard to,
Research.
no, it'd be hard to, because they're independently owned, right?
Oh,
So who would you present it to? Like the Boston Pizza in each community, because,
Right.
and each community is different, but they're not branched, like you can't
Yeah.
own the head of
That's
Boston
a good-
Pizza.
Right.
same subway.
Yeah, I just had a comment. We don't have to submit.
No.
Just FYI.
And we almost, it's almost always us that does.
Yeah, if Wolf Creek doesn't, yeah, whoever we submit has usually been the recipient of this.
Pick something.
Jason's research.
I think
So
so.
you can make that into a motion.
It's just nice to do something smaller rather than these big oil companies, but they're the ones with money that actually do our friends of education. Lucy?
And, you know, the criteria include the commitments to the student school trusteeship in the community, involvement in community activities other than those noted in the field of education, are highly effective in encouraging and fostering student achievement, but it's looking for not only education, but community also. So I mean, your Lions clubs or your Rotaries or your Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and maybe they have been nominated before, you know.
FCS.
How about the Legion?
Yeah,
Do we all have legions?
not anymore,
But
but
they had poster contests and they come in and talk to the kids. Or I know each legion is.
oh, and they come in for Remembrance Day
Remembrance
ceremonies.
They also contribute to the Bronx World Tour, which runs out of Bronx Secondary. They make contributions to that as well
I like
here in
it.
Bronx.
But they're all individual
Yeah.
legions, but we could somehow royalty them because there is, they're under an umbrella, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
A Royal Canadian.
Yeah.
And most communities would have it.
In the newspaper, there was some article about, about some funds being provided to whether you open up a-
So,
Sonovus Energy. Okay. It's $1,500.
so does someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we nominate Royal Canadian.
Okay, and Legion as a whole,
As a
right?
whole.
So not Rainbow or Pinoca or, okay. I don't know.
Is it sort of-
Yes.
Lucy.
I know it sounds like, and I don't know, because I'm not, I used to be a Lions member, and so again, you have your Lion leader
Yeah.
for your central region or whatever, but they still are in charge of Clive and Alex and whoever. So if we nominate Royal Canadian Legion,
There's a zone
who,
commander.
Zone 4, then whoever the
There's zone
commander
commanders.
would be the recipient.
Okay, absolutely. So all those in favor of Ruby's motion? All right, unanimous, and we would ask Jason to make sure that's submitted. Thank you. We're going to move on to 5.7, and that's the ME Global Park expansion. So the city of Lacombe is just looking for written permission from Wolf Creek School Board to expand and upgrade the field house in the ME Global Athletic Park. So they just needed a written submission from us.
But is that okay? Like, you agree with that?
Kelly,
I'll make that motion.
all right. What's those two questions, Brett?
It's just kind of hard to follow the plan. I blew it up, but basically it looks like they're adding another part onto it, or is it going to be a second story? I wasn't sure.
So it'll be another part, another building along the side of that. So this is phase 1 of their expansion plan, and the board has already advised of putting the running track around the football stadium. So they are starting on the actual building, or they want to start on the actual building. With permission.
Yeah.
Yes, it is actually, I think that will space it looks like.
Thank you.
Okay, so, oh, go ahead.
Is there any liabilities for us? that we should be concerned about?
Just
With the lease agreement, I think it transfers all of that over to the city for maintenance and response campaigns. So it's just it's really an extension of the lease agreement.
Want to make sure?
Potentially redoing the whole outside of the current area that they've leased. So. Sorry.
That's okay. I can see it.
I'm waiting for a
Maybe we have to
person
spread
to
them
make the
out just a
motion.
little bit.
She did.
So did
Or
you-
the
I made
B.
the motion,
Oh,
yeah, it's
okay.
just-
Was there any more discussion? No, okay, so all those in favor of Kelly's motion? Thank you. And Jason, I know that you guys are pushing it based on quickly, but I know they're eager to receive that letters. 5.8 is 5.8, 5.8 is locally developed courses. Do you want to get back on this, Jason?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. This is an annual process for the board. We have to have your approval either to renew or, in this case, it's an extension of these particular courses that are currently offered in our schools. So we have to provide documentation to Alberta Education around these, which we will. Board so approves extending these courses to August 31st, 2020.
I have Julie Sanders and Brett.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion to, for the board to approve it, but then was it one point that the government wasn't allowing those anymore, and now we are again?
Correct. Yeah, there's been a change in their position around the courses in that I think there was a plan to limit the courses or change them. But I think that there was a lot of feedback on that plan, and so now they've allowed those to continue. There's still a lot required to get approval, but if they're already approved, which all of these courses were approved long ago, and so for us as a school division, our schools as they request them, then we just extend that, and Department of Education has been supportive of that to continue. They are popular. The calculus, the AP courses are fairly limited. That's Ponoka Secondary that offers an AP program. So that particular course wouldn't be as heavily enrolled. But musical theater, forensic science, and reading are all very popular and quite beneficial to students.
Wow, look at us offering choice in education.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so all
Smart
all
guys
right,
over here.
No, I was just gonna make the motion.
Okay,
Judy
so
said.
all those in favor of Julie's motion? Perfect, thank you. Rural Caucus of Alberta. Do I go ahead, Lucy?
Yeah. Obviously, because we didn't have the SGM, we didn't meet. So it was just sent out via email, and for Rural Caucus to proceed, they do need the budget approved. And it does look like it's going to be an increase of about $130 per board on average over last year's budget. And then the other material in here is just basically speaking about the meetings and stuff that the Rural Caucus chair has had with the ministry and what they're advocating for. So I don't know.
So I have a question, and it seems to me that this organization is really ramped up and is doing a lot of good things, and obviously if they're meeting with the Minister of Education, then it's a worthwhile exercise for us. Eh?
I think so. I really find that the meetings are very few and far between, and they only back on to an ASB or a PSBA, but they've always provide really good PD. They're looking to CAS to give information and feedback, and they've made a lot of traction as far as transportation and what the rural issues actually are. So I really think it's a worthwhile.
So they're looking for motions from every board that's a member of Rural Caucus so they can approve their budget. Is that the desire?
Yeah, because if I was to be sitting in person at the meeting, you as a board would have told me yes or no. So then when the vote comes, I would have voted how my board indicated that I should vote.
So did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion that the executive of the RCASB remain within the budget of, I guess, 39,144 for the fiscal year starting September 1, 2020 and ending August 31st, 2021, and all participating boards fee. No, that's what the motion I want to make.
Well, that's what it says here.
Yeah.
Well, it does, but don't you think that's for the? I'll just say that I'd like to move that we approve the Rural Caucus of Alberta School Board's proposal for cost recovery for 2021.
That should cover it. Because this one's kind of open-ended that
Yeah.
we'll all be charged a certain amount, but not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kelly?
But they're writing the motions that it's gonna be based on the 39,144 divided by 42.
I would think so, but I think that's the motion that our RCSAB will make, that they want the motion from the board saying if we approve their budget. I'll vote for it.
There's my great
Great. More questions? All right, so all those in favor of Lucy's motion? Unanimous.
And can you just send me that motion once done by
Uh, The next one is a letter from STAR regarding playground. So Father Lacombe School is having some redesign and reconstruction on their existing site. They don't have room for their playground. So they were asking basically if they can build the playground on our land and share it with our students. It happens in other schools and it works well, so.
We do it Blacktop.
Grant?
There's already a playground there that they share with, it used to be Nelson School, because I helped create that playground, with the upper elementary. And so that's still there, so is it just because they got a bundle of money from the government, so they want to do another one?
Playgrounds are- They're getting a playground from the government with the school now.
Right, so is there actually enough room to put another one there? That's my question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, from the conversation I had with Superintendent of Star Attorney Bouchard, he indicated that there is, I just drew a rough picture here that you'll see in that square. That's actually my drawing.
Very nice.
I try to, with my motor skills sometimes, that's not fine. But yeah, there is room in that space. And I have consulted with both Tracy Duckett and Sonia Dykes regarding that request. And of course, they're supportive because it expands use of playground space, which
Yeah.
is welcome. So yeah, there will be space for it.
Okay, I was just concerned about.
Where's it going actually?
So if you look at the red square, the
Tell me the location
so
from the current one.
it's just straight to the north of the current school, in that location there.
So there's the handicap playground. And then so it'll go down
To
the new
The Nelson School.
the replacement school.
Their school, by the way, just to give you a sense of what they're rebuilding, the rebuild calls for their school to actually extend just about to the front sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're pushing the school that way. and extending it. No, but
they're not tearing it down.
they are, but what they're doing is they're building and tearing down at the same time in stages or phases, which is a challenge, but that's the way they've designed it, so it'll.
Power to them.
Yeah.
You making a motion, Lacombe?
Will the back part of the school be removed or will it
It'll
expand?
be brand new.
It will be brand new,
Yeah, the
but
whole-
but
so
the
the whole-
location will still be the same.
Correct,
you're
yeah,
not
it's the same footprint of the current, it's the same
other
amount.
than
of
coming forward.
Right to the street.
Right to the street on the front, the school's pushing to the front.
Yeah, I can make that motion.
All right, so Kelly's made a motion to respond to STAR.
Write a letter.
Okay, so all those in favor? unanimous, thank you. PSBA is gathering information as for transportation issues. So they have a questionnaire here. So they're part of the task force. And it's basically asking, do you currently have transportation agreement with any other school boards? Lucy?
I would make a motion to, yeah, I think director superintendent to fill out the form, because I don't believe that any of these questions really are trustee specific.
And it's due tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh, geez. Sorry, Jason.
Sorry, Roger.
Is it Roger gonna say sorry, Jackie?
No,
Yeah,
yes,
I think
yeah.
we'll need time to go through it. But we can certainly do our best to get it. They're very specific to a number of agreements and arrangements that we have, so we can look at that.
Get Ron on the phone, send it to Ron.
Okay, 5.1.
Pam,
Oh, sorry.
some of these are very political questions too. Do you want them answering it? Like, what are your views on being a provincial-wide transportation fee schedule? Is that a political question, or is it,
Yeah.
what are the transportation factors need to be addressed, especially considering the new challenges of public school board?
Okay, what questions?
9 and 10 are the ones I just read
Okay,
at the
so-
bottom. But I know Roger is very more diplomatic than some of us sitting around the board.
So the question one
Nothing.
is, do we have a transportation agreement?
Yeah.
I think that's not gonna be a problem.
We do.
Success in implementing.
Oh, sorry.
But number 7, or are you going from? top
1,
down?
2, 2B. 3.
Roger, have you read this?
I
What is it?
did, and like, I didn't get to the political questions. I was
The
like,
better question is, which one was like not?
they
one?
requested the position to be on the committee, and then they really don't know about. Honestly, I guess we
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So question 7, right? What incentives should the ministry put in place to support transportation agreements?
Like, I don't know that Roger wants to answer that question.
What incentives would be more money?
Or less school.
Yeah, no?
Didn't think Roger wanted.
And then 8 would be something Roger would answer. What are your views on a province-wide transportation?
I think they're moving towards transporting charter schools and private schools and, all schools now, as opposed to just funding for public and Catholic. Because they did provide, like Christian schools, a transportation grant, and now they don't.
That's my good one.
That's why they have their own buses, because they wanted us to transport them for free. And anyways, but now if they're opening up the education system, they are in all likelihood opening up the transportation system as well. And they'll only have X number of dollars to transport, like they have X number of dollars to support schools.
Yeah.
So that might be a part of their philosophy about opening up school systems and transporting kids to school. All kids that are funded, right? Just the thought.
And they've spent so much time, the previous government
Oh.
spent so much time on transportation. We've asked so many more questions. Now I think we're here again. And we're trying to do a one shot fits all, but the bottom line is you still transfer kids a long distance away. And so there's not gonna be one answer that fits rural and urban.
No.
That kind of falls in with that letter from the public school boards
Mhm.
about funding.
Yeah, that's good.
It was a very good letter, but I mean, now if you take that one step further into transportation, that makes
Yeah, that's this one right here.
sense and a huge difference.
And number 6, within the current rules governing transportation, what factors need special attention? Right?
Especially social.
I feel like.
You may as a board want to consider having us answer the questions that we can answer because more factual. Some of the questions that have been outlined that are requesting information, you may want to either just not respond to those, or you could provide us with thoughts maybe between now and tomorrow.
Tomorrow at noon,
Yeah.
if you could fill in your parts, do it as a Google Doc, and any trustees that are interested could
Sure.
put their thoughts in, and just be sure that we all take a minute and look at it. Because it
I'm
could
good
be
with that.
one person's thought. others.
So are you gonna put it in your Google Doc?
No, because I don't know how to do that, but I know a couple guys who do. So they'll fill out their part, and then we'll look at it, and tomorrow at 1 o'clock, it'll be sent. Well, I don't want to put that deadline on you guys tomorrow.
But we're cut off, trustees are
You know,
cut off at 1.
We're cut off at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, if we haven't responded, then it's getting sent without our information.
Okay.
All right. Who made that motion? You? Oh, so all those in favor of Lucy's motion? Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna call a quick 10-minute break.
We actually,
Jackie, you want to just take pause on that?
we actually had the chair of the task force, that Nathan Newdorf.
Okay, so we're just gonna return back to the PSBA transportation questionnaire. So question number 7, what incentives would the ministry put in place to support transportation agreements?
Reduce strike time.
Like all the schools and start this thing, like the bell thing.
They just to pick up on that thought is one of the real challenges we have with our ride times is actually impacted by assignable time and time restrictions that we have in our schools, because often in order to meet those requirements, we're limited. So I think that one of the considerations might be to provide more flexibility in our schools around the assignable time. Yes.
So I think in that question, if I'm reading it correctly, they want to know what should they give us for to support transportation agreements, right? Like if we have, like we do transportation agreements, what should they do towards do have?
I can just add 2 on that. It could be a case of increasing the allocation grant for cases where you have agreements in place and that you're transporting and maximizing efficiencies on the roads. Could be one way.
Because you've already put a lot of work in it, and obviously it works well.
And I do agree with Jason's last comment though, an incentive should be flexibility around assignable time. Because if we are gonna enter into these transportation agreements, those belt start and stop times are so different that if there's not flexibility in the assignable time, there's no way we can enter into transportation agreements. Because isn't that what stopped us to have some agreements in the past?
And if another school, if charter school doesn't have a sign. And they can do whatever they want with their days and their teachers. That could have good sense to them. So we all need to be playing by the same rules for our education of students.
Is there anything else we wanted to add in there as an incentive?
It needs to be good for the community. It needs to make sense. That where ride times matter, where pickup points matter, where number on the bus matters. But that's good. I think.
For 8, fill in.
Number what, 8?
Yeah.
Please provide us with your current transportation student fee schedule.
And then, so number 9, what are your views on there being a province-wide transportation fee schedule?
What does that mean?
They're just asking if the province said this is the fees for kids under 2.4 kilometers, this is the fee for, that they're mandating the fee instead of
I
us.
think that would be very hard depending on how far you drive. You know, clusters are easy and
Less than 2.4 is easy.
not even necessarily that, but
There goes more autonomy.
2.4 is technically not even up for discussion here, right?
No.
Under
Yeah,
But the fees should cover
cost.
us.
yeah,
And our costs might be different.
than our neighbors.
Right, I guess we can kind of put it that use they're already, the transportation system are already.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, when you talk about a reasonable system, they could say there is no under 2.4 because that's not required.
Right, and so then we can't divide it.
Which would be good in my opinion, but
Yeah.
Pick them out, they're on the curve.
Need more information. Like a fee schedule. If it covers the cost and it's equitable, it's fine.
Yeah.
Fine, or reasonable, not fine. What are the unique challenges for public schools?
So number 10 is what other transportation factors need to be addressed, especially considering the unique challenges of public schools?
Rural versus urban?
I think that's one. I would say like calendars, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Assignable time is a challenge. Policies on inclement.
Oh,
weather
yes,
is a
that's a
Right,
good one.
yeah.
um,
Votes.
So, and you know, it's like, there's just those challenges that if, you know, if we're regionalizing at all,
We got 2 of them working on this now.
it's difficult if they, you know, if we're closing schools and they're
They're not minus 40.
So I guess in bold letters, first point is local autonomy.
Bingo.
So we will go back to, if anyone sees a question that they want to add on to. we can still do that.
Yeah, I think we've got, the rest are factual, they need to know.
All right, so we're okay with that now.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're-
Jason's relieved, it's not done.
So we're gonna move on to 5.12, and so we need to set the committee dates. And
When
is
is
that
that
the
good?
short meeting, right?
Half day.
Yeah,
Have to keep in mind Joe and Deb, right? So do we pick one date or do we pick?
I think because you have two members now, if you pick, I'd say pick one date and if they make it, they make it.
Are we talking September?
Yeah.
Yes.
Middle, beginning?
The initial one is more a discussion of what the auditor is going to do.
Right. So middle of the month, end of the month?
Normally around the middle of the month.
Give them a chance to settle in.
What days do you like meetings, Jake?
15, 16. looks good.
Okay, let's go to
14.
16. Tuesdays I'm gone.
Are we looking at October?
September.
Or
September 16th?
Just want to check, sorry.
Just do
Our
your meeting that
meeting,
day.
yeah.
Okay.
15th doesn't work for Kelly, how about 14th?
14 March.
That works for me, it's a Monday, but that'll work.
Audit?
Yeah. Are you good for 14th, Kelly?
Yeah, Monday, yeah.
Room open?
Tuesdays are my only days.
we'll see.
I
Baptist
move
City then?
that we hold our audit committee meeting on September 14th at 9 AM in the Wareham Center.
9 AM, Monday, September 14th. Got it.
All right, was there any discussion regarding that date?
Is that usually a half day?
So all those in favor? Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to reentry plan for the workplace, the guidelines. And so Jason, can you give a little bit of background there, where all the information is there?
Yes, so there's actually 3 documents, one of which is still in a draft format, but has been shared as of yesterday with our administrators, and that's the actual scenario 1 reentry document. So I will share that with the board. This information here does, in the top part, speak to just the, I guess, the reason for the work that we're currently doing around scenario 1, given what the minister and Dr. Hinshaw suggested last Friday in relation to the target is how they refer to it as far as scenario 1, which is in-school classes resume with restrictions and measures in place. So what I can share with the board is that we have drafted a reentry plan around scenario 1. We have shared that with our administrators. That happened yesterday. And we also, at the same time that we shared it with our administrators, encouraged them to share it with their staff. We've created a Q&A document with questions. We had close to 80 questions come in already just by yesterday on it. There's lots of questions, and it's not unexpected or unanticipated. Because if you look at the guidelines that Alberta Education released, they're fairly general in a lot of cases. There's a lot of flexibility within those guidelines as far as giving us the ability to understand what it means for us to implement them. So we are also, in addition to our administrators reviewing it, we've arranged for the ATA local to have the opportunity to give some feedback as well. And then our full plan to communicate out, not the entire plan, but the highlights of the plan is next Wednesday, which is for most of our schools the last day. We're planning on sending out a communication to every family in Wolf Creek with some details, and we're hopeful, I'm not sure we can pull this off, but we're actually hopeful that we can create a video. And a video that would actually show what those restrictions and some of those safety measures will look like within our schools for starters. And the reason why we decided to do that is that it's one thing for us to describe on paper
Yeah.
what that will look like, but
Which looks
yeah, we need to have a visual. And that will include as well us and the precautions and the safety measures we're taking on the bus as you enter a school, what those measures will look like. And so, as I said, I think that there's a lot for us to do in a short period of time, so we're hopeful we can get the video created and ready to go, but our goal is to get it out by next Wednesday. One of the items within our reentry plan, and it's coming up, I know, a little later in relation to the budget, is that we do anticipate that we will have some students and families that will look at the reentry plan and still have a difficult time making a decision to go back to school in September.
Right.
So that does play into that, your agenda item 5.15. We feel we have to have a plan to address some of those families. We don't currently have, outside of the current program that we're offering in home with our teachers providing that to all students, we are absolutely hopeful that all of our families will choose to send their children back, but we likely will not have all of them feeling like they can come back. So, so that's just another item that I know will come up a little bit later in the agenda, but the reentry plan for district office staff and for school staff, just to give you some insight, we've done a lot of work trying to understand what our obligations are as an employer when it comes to our staff returning to work. So there's been a lot of legal consultation I can share with you. We have a duty to accommodate employees who have a legitimate, verifiable medical condition that maybe limits their ability to come back to work. So we have communicated this to our district office staff and to our school staff so that they understand the phasing and the way in which we're going to address it. And we feel there needs to be a very consistent approach across the school division so that we don't have one school dealing with it one way and another school dealing with it differently. So that's something that we have communicated. The feedback has been positive around the reentry plans for staff. And I can also share with you that for our school staff, the majority of our school staff will likely return next week, given the guidelines and what's expected now of our schools to prepare for reentry in late August, early September. If some of our staff though are unable to come in next week, they likely will, of course, and they're professionals, they'll come in at a different time through the summer to prepare, but our principals right now are coordinating a lot of those activities to get schools ready as best we can, understanding that it could change and it could be modified from what we currently believe it will be, but we're very hopeful that scenario one is of course what will happen and will be approved, and then we can plan for that at startup. So I think that covers most of the bases on that, right? So questions?
I did notice in this document that it says here, like phase 3, I am legally required to isolate for a minimum of 10 days after testing positive. You will be required to present a medical certificate. Now, I don't know because I haven't checked, but I know the government directives were you are not required to provide proof. And so if the government was indicating to us or to people, to employers, is that changing, or why did we say that you will be required? And in other places, like I have symptoms such as a cough, you may be required.
Yeah.
And I know when she was questioned in the town hall meeting about that. If a student was sick, and left, with COVID symptoms, and they would have to have one negative test to return to school. But it didn't sound like they needed proof of that negative test.
But this is our staff.
Yeah,
So the legal advice is, once again, we've had a lot of ongoing discussions with our legal counsel around this, is that, as a school division, it comes down to due diligence on our part as the employer. And we want to ensure that we are taking the steps necessary to create and maintain safety within our schools. So they may be required to present a medical certificate indicating they're medically fit. We do have the ability to do
I'm
that,
good
right,
with that one.
as an employer.
Yeah.
In terms of students, that is tricky and a challenge.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
yeah.
We will take advice, of course, in that scenario potentially from the Alberta Medical Services and HS. But, and to be clear, there is a likelihood that that will happen at some point. That we will have a situation where a student is potentially going to be impacted that way, or a family.
Yeah.
So the best advice that we've been given around that is that we just need to ensure, going back to the reentry plan around screening and symptom monitoring, and making sure that we have a very clear plan in place for that. But we do understand that it is going to be a challenge with students, for sure, and with parents, because and so part of our communication plan right now is to make sure our parents understand if any symptoms present, then we will not have that student in school.
About in the house, what if mom or dad?
We have, if they're symptomatic, that doesn't trigger anything on our part. It's if the child, unless they're trying to commit to the school, of course, but if the child is symptomatic, then that's where our screening will take place. To be honest, and I know this is a question coming up around some of the challenges around the current guidelines that have been provided, is, in my opinion, we're really challenged around the screening. And the reason for that is the government's released the guidelines a questionnaire in a paper format that we're expected to distribute to our parents. And the expectation is they complete that every day, and our staff.
Oh, right.
No way.
And use that to guide them around sending their child to school or not. The challenge we have is that, how do we verify that a parent has done that with their child? And if that
Can't.
can't,
And
right?
you could even make them and verify,
Yes.
and the parent doesn't read it,
Right.
and they click it and say done.
So we are actually following, our goal is to follow the guidelines and the expectations very carefully and very completely. And as much as maybe we feel that there should be more, we have to take the advice of the guidelines and the information that's been provided. And I think that's where a lot of the questions are coming, is that there is sometimes a heightened concern that comes from our staff, and it's understandable. But I think what we have to do is, once again, really anchor ourselves in those guidelines and the language, and I encourage our administrators to really read and understand the language and the expectation. What are we expected to do? And then with that, make sure we're diligent in fulfilling that requirement and follow that carefully and closely. And that is our approach, and will continue to be our approach, because truly, that's what we can control.
So,
No, volunteers will not be, not allowed. The schools, basically, at this point, just to answer that question, schools will not be open to the public to the degree, obviously, that they were prior. Measures will be taken, and our administrators express this. They do not want their doors open full time and having people just free flow.
Come
into their
in and
building.
out like they
So
do.
measures will have to be taken at every school to limit that. Field trips will not be permitted, so there will not be field trips, and a number of things.
and that's something I just wanted to mention to the trustees. I had a parent council meeting the other day, and we hear parent councils because they've heard about, the kids should be maybe, probably, hopefully returning to school in September. And their ideas and thoughts, how it's gonna look, without, digging into research. They said, oh, can we use, the fund or the field trip money for September. No, you know, because it says in the guidelines, you can't do that. You can't use field trips. So I think parents just have to be assured that they're returning to school, and things are going to be very different. Kelly?
So when you fill out the questionnaires, even the questionnaires we fill out, where do they go and who's looking at them? And how are you gonna do it for 100 or whatever, 7,000 students?
So we can't.
But
That's
who's
the
reading what
challenge.
we're doing now?
So the challenge, so as it's been explained to us, is that it goes back to the due diligence piece, is that we can have expectations and communicate those expectations, but we can't necessarily enforce them.
But I'm just saying physically now, what happens to that form I'm filling out right now?
Currently, Jackie, I guess that's maybe a question for you.
So do you review that?
Does somebody read it? Is it somebody's job to read it?
Well, I checked it to make sure you all.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, that's 6 of us.
No, but there has to, everybody in the building, obviously.
As
Yeah,
a visitor, as a
but I
visitor.
just say,
We're not.
look at,
Well, you are by definition a visitor.
Because we don't come here every day.
Yeah, you don't work in the office every day, so that's why.
Okay, so that's why.
That's why, yeah.
yeah, but I'm just saying, this is
Yeah.
overwhelming, what they're asking parents to do, people to do, they can't even monitor it.
So if you read the guidelines closely, it sounds, I would guess that it's just gonna be people's responsibility to say, if you're sick, stay home, these are the things, and so it says the schools have to, and it's a must, provide that questionnaire, and the parents are to look at it every day or click on it, and if they answer yes to anything, it then clicks on to Alberta Health Services, which will advise if they offer testing or not. And
Well, that's interesting.
so that's how that works. So, you know, for us to do it, because the question did come up, she asked about testing in schools. And I knew she meant screening. She said testing. But it's not our job. I think it's for parents.
So I have shared the plan, you have it, and so once you see the plan, I would encourage you, as we're asking with all of our staff to review it and just understand, and it is a draft, it's not finalized. You'll see timelines and commitments and also who's responsible. We really wanted to be clear on who's responsible.
So is the plan the one on our agenda item, or is there a different?
That one
plan?
wasn't, no,
There's a different plan.
it's a
that we
different plan, and I
received?
just forwarded, yeah, my apologies, there was a bit of a mix up there. But
I was gonna say, I didn't see any
You do
draft.
have it on your email, it's there,
Oh,
I just
okay.
shared it. So
On
you do
email?
have it. Yeah, you'll have it as
Oh,
a
here,
as a
here
shared
it is.
document. And it's called Scenario 1 Guidance for School Reentry September.
Okay, Lucy and then Lori.
Good to have it.
So, we have been made aware of the district office protocols. So do we have a document that indicates how you enter the office? Because again, you just don't want the public coming in. Are we putting up a screen? How are we keeping our receptionist safe? Does it need to be by appointment only?
The doors are locked.
At this point today, right? But again, in stage 3, just like our
Right.
schools, you know,
What's the plan here?
but I don't know that I've seen anywhere, and I've just kind of, but what is our office type protocol for both our schools and our district office?
So in the reentry plan, I can speak on the school side and I'll ask Roger to speak on the district office side. But on the school side, what we're currently working on, and you'll see in the document is, we've consulted with our admin assistants, for example, in our schools. Half would like to have some kind of a barrier like plexiglass, half don't.
Mm.
So what we're doing is procuring a lot of PPE. Because, for example, a shield, a face shield, if you're in a place where you're interacting with the public a lot, a face shield allows you to have protection everywhere, not just in that
I like
space. So we're trying to procure, and that's coming up, we're trying to procure roughly 200 face shields, 1,000 washable masks, We're also trying to procure vast amounts of hand sanitizer stations, which will be pumps, spray bottles with disinfectant, 2,000 non-medical masks. So we're trying to procure through the Alberta government a lot of these items.
Yeah.
The challenge we have is that a lot of these items, as you can imagine,
Aren't
are
available.
are in huge demand. So we are, as of tomorrow, planning on getting our order in and understanding that we will need to have it ready to go for the end of August.
Just as an FYI, a lot of the municipalities, because even us now too, I mean, it was provided for free through Alberta, your emergency management, whatever. And so to procure it through that agency is extremely more expensive than procuring it on your own. You'd think going through the Alberta government,
No, you wouldn't.
you be getting some kind of savings.
Nah.
Trust me, you're not. Just as an FYI.
But we've actually compared the prices, and at this point, the government prices are lower than the other vendors that we've looked at.
Okay, well, good, because
Yeah.
that's not what
And
I've been hearing.
maybe it's changed, but
Yeah.
when we looked at the list and the cost, because they do cite each of those items and how much, it's actually less than what we're seeing.
Oh, well,
from
good,
our
because
vendors.
that's not what I've been hearing around the table.
Okay, it's interesting, and it's such
Yeah.
a challenge in the sense that we're trying to anticipate how much we need for volume,
Yeah,
and then also, the one thing I would say about going through government is that we believe that there's a consistency around the standards. that
I
we're
agree with
procuring,
that.
yeah.
Because we're getting a lot of correspondence from vendors.
I know I
Quite
get my emails.
Quite honestly, we're not certain that those
Yeah.
vendors are providing the quality of the materials that we
Yeah.
need. So there's a quality assurance piece through the government that we're feeling more comfortable and confident in.
Yeah.
But the plan does call for all of those items to be purchased and prepared and delivered and set up in our schools. Floor stickers, directional stickers, all of those things we're procuring.
It's in our next, one of our items here.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
5.1.
what about our district office protocol?
Roger, do you want to just update that? We just sent that over.
Well, we've actually sent out the report. Haven't actually sent out the actual vision office protocols, which would be very similar to what schools will be doing. We talked about that with visitors at the schools, and Greg is looking at developing there might be a kiosk where the visitor comes in and fills out the appendix A from, and it would be very similar to here, although we were talking about having the same form that you guys fill out before the visitor comes in, but also see some issues with the courier driver that's just showing up.
Yeah.
Those types of things that are happening. So at this point in time, we're not really looking to open up the office until August 17th.
Yep, it's still on August 17th.
But at that point in time, and we're definitely looking at if there is a meeting, it has to be arranged, and the individual who the meeting is with is going to be coming up to pick up the individual at the front. But we're not hiring a full-time receptionist until August 17th. That's the deadline. And then basically there could be more security person than that. But I mean, when I visited the city of Lacombe, I actually had to sign in. I had to wait at the front until the person came. I mean, that's just standard protocol nowadays with the security things that happen.
Well,
Go ahead, Marie.
just question, what happened to the receptionist we had out there? Was she laid off?
She actually was working part-time for Alberta Health Services as well, and then they kind of offered her.
More hours.
So yeah, she actually was the screening person, I think.
She's a site nurse.
Karina.
Yeah.
So she quit here then?
She did quit, and we had made arrangements that she could actually work out if she wanted to, but she just hasn't been back since.
So more savings there.
So,
Yeah, because they'll figure it out. Let's move on.
So the plan, you have it, feedback was positive, there's lots of questions, which is perfectly understandable. We'll work on providing clarity, and then there will be a parent communication across the whole district by next Wednesday.
Well,
Okay, I do have one question with the form we're filling out. I don't have an issue doing it. Quite happy to put yes or no. But primarily, when you read all the relaunch stuff, those forms are filled out for places that aren't practicing social distancing. So are you the one saying, have you been in touch, contact, that sort of thing? Doctors, dentists, physio, daycares, places where you can't social distance. You're still wanting the forms filled out, but you guys are social distancing.
So, I mean, you're
With
saying that,
visitors, so it's a visitor, so we're visitors coming in. Like we can visit, and I'm not trying to like Walmart, Canadian Tire, wherever, right? You don't have to fill those in. So when, but you're still expecting us to social distance even though we filled that.
yes,
Is that correct?
well, I think that's a requirement of the province still.
To social distance, not to fill in the form. That's that the electronic form seems to be going above and beyond what you need to be doing. Because it's basically like for office workspaces that you're symptom-free, that's.
So they're not requiring the people that actually work there to fill out that form, and they can, but I think they're still requiring visitors to come to that workspace. So,
Okay, not that I ran into, but there's
Libraries aren't patrons.
in swimming pools and, and that's, and I guess that's my, I just hate to see someone spending a bunch of time, not as me, I just have to click a button, but a bunch of time reviewing them when you're
Nobody-
social distance.
Nobody's reviewing it, that's what we, Jackie is, because she's interested.
Yeah.
I'm not interested,
It's
so
assigned to her.
the-
Goes set up.
But nobody reviews them, even in health services, nobody.
Well, when you go to the dentist, they look at it and see, okay, you don't have symptoms, because I'm gonna put my hands in, right? Same with the daycare, they have to look at them in childcare settings, because they're gonna be changing your child's diaper, and, they need to, there's no social distance. And I just guess, like, you guys don't feel secure in social distancing here well enough.
I guess you're,
I'm
not sure that I guess I'm not gonna question your
Yeah.
interpretation of that rule, but I think it could be interpreted different ways.
okay, that's fair. Yeah, no, and like I said, I don't mind filling it out.
And I think as we move along, and if there's no more kind of occurrences that
Yeah.
supports those kind of things might be relaxed,
Yeah.
I guess. At this point in time, that's what.
No, and that's fair.
I think the other part of it too is there was some conversation early around what measures that we thought we needed to take in respect of the staff in the office. And I think, as Roger said, as time goes on, certainly like anything else, we'll review it and it will change.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it'll change. But I think we're maybe, if we're being a little too cautious and careful,
It's better
then
than not
I
being careful.
think it would represent just the desire within the staff here to make sure that we're
Absolutely.
taking those
Yeah, it's better than
precautions.
going the other way.
It's the way to approach that.
I think things will change relatively quickly, and they didn't, in that town hall meeting, they didn't have the answers to all the questions that were asked. But they offered to get back.
Get
to- I don't know
clarity.
how they will do that, but yeah, so I mean, things will probably change again.
Yeah.
Quite
Just quickly before we move on, so what happens, what's our plan if we don't actually get to do go back to school with some safety measures, that it happens that we have to actually split up our classes because the cohorts are too big, we're alternating days, like, are we gonna work on a plan or just wait until August 1st?
Yeah, I think that, and it's a great question and one that our administrators asked yesterday.
Yeah.
The enormity and the planning and detailing around just one of the scenarios, which right now is scenario one, to be honest, is completely consuming. And it would be overwhelming for us to throw that same, as you can see, it's 27 pages.
Yeah, I saw that.
So for us to put another one like that forward and then a third scenario forward, we felt that it
Third,
would-
we know.
yeah, well, hopefully third and second, but yeah, I think that if our principals understand if it is a scenario two, when that announced, let's say that happened in the middle of July, let's just use that. I said to them yesterday, if that's the case, I will probably need you to come back into work. And we will have to then revise the current plan and modify it to address that scenario. So they know that. We would then plan in a detailed way around that scenario too, but I think it's just given where we're at currently at this time of the year and what we need to do moving forward, I think we just went with the scenario that obviously Dr. Hinshaw and Mr. LaGrange said, that's our target, that's what we're focused on. So, but I do know and we understand, they did say plan for all three. What they don't understand is that operationally, it's impossible to do that to the scale that we would need to make something actually work in our district and not overwhelm our staff.
And just to follow up on that, I totally agree. If there was to be a second wave and we see, you know, that something happens like what happened in March, I don't believe the government's gonna tell us on a Friday that on Monday there is no more school. But I think what they will tell us is on Friday, on Monday it's half or whatever. So I think though at some point, if there is a second wave and things go sideways again, I think they're gonna do the very best they can not to let this happen again. But that half or that, you know, that other scenario.
You know, the interesting comment that was made from Dr. Hinshaw was that if there is a reoccurrence or a spike in cases, it would be dealt with very regionally in that location as compared to a blanket across the entire province. So for sure, if let's say Clive School had a major outbreak and infections, then
Maybe
Clive,
just close
Clive
down.
School would be Clive School would be the one that was addressed.
Okay.
But the rest of the schools would probably remain in
you're
the
right.
scenario one. And I think that's an important distinction between what happened in March and what likely will happen. So things like contact tracing and just more of an understanding of spread might help us as we move into potentially, heaven forbid, a scenario where there's further outbreak and a second wave comes.
And I do think that we need to, talk to the government about the cost to our school division in terms of hours and work and things that you can't put a price on.
Right.
All of the, you know, from Friday to Monday, going from school to no school to, you know, lockdowns. Like, I think that really has to be sent out.
I agree.
Formally.
I agree, and we need to find a place to do that.
Yeah, we're putting our best foot forward with our planning, and we're optimistic and hopeful. I would say that's the tone and the mood. I would say in the district, but we have to do the best we can to also clarify so many different pieces, and we'll do our best. And as I was reminded yesterday, you know, it's not about perfection, it's about just doing the best we can, and we're all doing that to the best of our ability.
I was really surprised at her conversation about when you say contact tracing. That's basically what it's all about.
Everybody
should
focus,
It's, you know, we can't social distance every student, but we will know who every student's been in contact.
The seating arrangements and the cohorts, right?
So seating plans on our buses, accurate seating plans in every classroom space, accurate. Yeah, those are the things you're right.
And you always got that little kid that ain't sitting in the right seat.
They'll need to stay in their box.
And so it was interesting to hear when she was talking about that, just the difference in, because it was hard for callers to wrap their head around that, because they were still thinking social distancing, you know. They're like, no, it's about
keeping track.
If you're playing baseball, you know, which 30 people are you playing baseball team? You know, and now we have 8 teams ready to play. So, you know, make sure you know all their names, right?
Yeah. Record keeping.
She answered very well, though. She did.
She did.
She does a good job.
She's awesome.
And even talked about in some of the city schools that asked questions, they said about like just closing classrooms of students. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives you some good background.
Yeah.
Yes, and we appreciate all the hard work that you guys have done,
It's been a team
keeping
effort.
everyone safe.
It's really been-
I just received an email, there's a meeting in regards to, the transportation on July the 7th.
July 8th.
Over the July 8th,
Mhm.
because we know everybody wants to go on July 8th.
Well, I just had the schedule yesterday.
And that's for you too? Or like- and- okay.
We'll add it.
Transportation Task Force, they're doing a road trip in Alberta with, to listen to people like a town hall, so there's Biggerville, Okotoks. Yeah,
Yeah,
14,
but who should be at that meet?
probably your board chair.
I'm thinking the superintendent.
And Roger.
Yeah.
Just where you want it to be on July 8th, right? Oh, Jason, you get excited.
I mean, they're all, you can go to Grand, no, sorry, it's July 7th, you're right, Pam. July 8th is Grand Prairie, July 9th is Peace River. Edmonton, July 10th, you can pick your poison there.
Okay, so probably we can add that one. School, oh, stream meetings live. So our board meetings are getting lots of views. Some of them have been because of just what's going on in the world and budget, etc. So I guess we just need to discuss if we can continue streaming them live or what our plans are.
Will it work?
Kelly?
So, put a motion forward, I would do, number 2. Because I think it's important for us to know who's in attendance, right? I feel creeped on that it's live or pre-recorded. I mean, during this time, I think it's great. Not that I have anything to hide, but, it's always interesting to know who's really, why they're here, what they're doing, or what their interests are. So I would say that we allow them in the building, the social distancing, make it public. I wouldn't be supporting streaming live or on a regular basis.
Is there, and I think that was the issue, is there seating space for public in here? Where they can't be within a meter of a doorway or a walkway, correct? So that's the concern.
Oh, you could.
Yeah. Right. And I agree with you, Kelly,
I agree with Kelly as well. What I was gonna say is, based on us being here for 3 years, we haven't had tons of public smash down our doors. So I think the budget was a big thing on people's minds, so that's why we had so many people looking in. So I think we have enough room to cover.
Lucy?
And again, once those office protocols are in place, again, you can open it to the public. That doesn't mean you can just come in. You know, we would have a designated amount, like, I think Jackie and Roger, whoever, did a lot of thought into the placement and the how we're gonna run the traffic and how we're going to do it. I think because we did have organizational this morning, they had to give us our own space for signing. And I don't know, because I haven't worked on it, but I think if you move back, we should be allowed to have Mark in here or Corinne in here, but we can only have so many extra. And we just have to figure out what that number is. And if it's public, you still have to you have to call or sign the paper or do whatever. You don't just get to come in.
Tree, believe in that. the insurance agency in Rigby, they have 2 people in there, and then everybody else has to wait outside.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could do something like that maybe too.
Royal Bank's the same way. They let you in
Most
2 at a time
businesses, I think.
with the door locked.
Rob,
But a public meeting is something that it would be difficult to say, you know, we're only allowing 2 of you in. I mean,
Yeah.
Brent has indicated, and he's right, that we haven't had a lot of people come in. And some of even the streaming that people that came in, it's just because they were not actually working with their kids that day.
Yeah.
So maybe they could.
And I watched certain
Situated.
things a couple times.
But I think that there's also a lot of boards that actually are, and municipalities and all those that are actually doing that already and have been doing it for quite some time. So, but
Doing what?
I think could we rearrange this and actually have lots of space? It would be more of a classroom setup as opposed to board meeting setup in order to maintain the 2 meters as well. But I mean, there are definitely options of changing them around.
Our seating range.
I haven't had a lot of feedback from anyone whether they're watching. I certainly haven't watched recorded.
Yeah.
So, Lori,
Yeah, I haven't either. I was actually surprised when I read that there were 50+ people watching, but I kind of knew because you can see one of the participants on the side, and it was that budget meeting. And I think it was probably a lot of EAs because their world was going to be.
I'm not sure it was that meeting, because that meeting we had over 80 people. at.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think Vince has gone back and tracked, and just, that's been the average on the meeting.
Because they have nothing better to do.
But then,
They have nothing better to do.
well, I think that Vince had something.
No.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it is 2020. Maybe it's time to live stream.
I wonder if we can still revisit it, like if Kelly's motion passes, I would suggest that we still revisit it. I'd be interested to see how this even worked. Because maybe the current technology, even what we have, isn't conducive. Or, I don't know, well, I guess we need to see if Kelly's motion passes, but I wouldn't like. Lori said, this is, 20th century, lots of municipalities, other boards are, it's very open and transparent. Just because everybody's not working, maybe after work, they want to see what we have to say, I don't know. So I wouldn't want to totally just forget about it if Kelly's motion passes.
I just think we should be doing it. So I will vote against.
so Kelly's motion is to not live stream.
Number 2,
Number 2.
allow people in the building. Because you're gonna have to do it anyway, whether you
Yeah.
stream or not. Correct?
Yes.
Streaming doesn't take out,
It does,
so you can only come publicly? You can only stream, you could never come to a public meeting?
if that's what we decide. Which I don't personally like, but no, yes.
Call the question, is he wants to make another one or whatever.
So say what was yours?
It's number 2 on there, board of trustees allow public to enter the meetings, bearing in mind that only a certain number of public can be allowed in the meeting. So that's what that is the motion. Talking about streaming, but I think you should always be allowed to go into public meetings. I hate to see everything being virtual.
So you like number 3 as well. So, so Kelly has a motion on the floor, so is everyone ready for that question? So all those in favor of Kelly's motion? And that's fine. So it's passed. So
Against? That'd be me.
against, yeah. I wasn't even. Will we, So we won't live stream at all now? Is that what that says?
Right now, we could revisit it right now.
And so, yeah, as soon as, for me, I'm notice of motion, it will probably be on a subsequent agenda. Because
Yeah.
with our current technology, I'd like to know how it works. If it's not so good, then I guess we discuss it and see if we can get the technology required. Because I don't want to give up on the live streaming, but
And we can also determine if there's any people that complain, because there is no, like, the feedback from people.
This is a technical question. So live streaming, does that mean recorded or once it's live and then it's gone?
Live is live and gone.
oh, right.
Can people
Oh,
also-
You can record it. It can be live streamed and you record
Those are
it.
technicalities we need to figure out for your future, in my opinion. of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we will move on to COVID-19 school reentry additional budget.
Oh.
So this is a big one, right?
Yeah. Where are we gonna get the money?
So we'll let, I'm gonna turn it over to Jason and Roger, because I think they do have a little bit more information.
Yeah, this is certainly challenging.
Take it out of IMR reserves, isn't that what
Challenging
portable
item.
is at?
So I want to start by just saying that obviously this isn't an item that was budgeted for when you approved your spring budget. Without going too far down that road. But we obviously, now that the guidelines have been released, we have mandated requirements around PPE, potentially expanding our custodial services to meet those requirements. We anticipate other costs which will be unknown until much later into the year around substitutes, both on the teacher side and support staff side. There's going to be undoubtedly costs that will be incurred. So I would then like to share that as much as this is our best thinking today, it could change very quickly over the course of the next number of weeks and months. So this is very much a shot in the dark. I will be honest and upfront about that. Roger and I have tried to work together on coming up with some figures, and we really are hard pressed to give you a definitive number, but I would like to just share the two items here. A lot of questions and inquiries have been coming in from both our staff, our administrators, and our parents in a scenario where students aren't willing or parents aren't willing to send their children to school in September. So the question that's coming forward, and this will be a question from the ATA local tomorrow as well, is what is expected of our schools, and specifically our teachers, if they're asked to provide what I would call a hybrid of instruction, in-class regular instruction, and then at the same time offer remote instruction, in-home instruction to students. Understanding we could have scenarios where a student registers at school, starts, but is home for 2 weeks. But that student would be registered, and then that student would be programmed by that teacher during that 2-week window. That would be reasonable. And within the realm of responsibilities for that particular teacher. What isn't in the realm of responsibilities and duties is to say to a teacher, you have to program for a student for 4 months working out of their home at the same time as you're providing instruction to your class. As a matter of fact, we would be challenged on that and we would not be able to support that kind of a model. And in fairness to our teachers, the question will be, under the current assignable time requirements, when does the teacher instruct that child?
Yeah.
They would have to do it outside of the regular school day.
School hours.
And their instructional hours and assignable time would not
They'd go
support it.
over.
Yeah, would not support it. So one model that we have considered, and understanding homeschooling is much different than currently what we're providing. Providing right now very focused, very structured support with teachers connecting with students daily and usually as a designated time, or providing work for the week, and that teacher supporting the student throughout that time. We believe that one option that we could provide would be homeschooling. For homeschooling, where we would be saying to that family who's coming forward and saying, not comfortable sending my child to school, that if you as a parent wanted a different option, that the option would be for you to be instructing your child at home. We would provide the materials and provide them with what they need to do that, but it would be under the guise of home education. Because if we move away from, once again, teacher in the school taking on that responsibility, we do not have the resources or the allocation of teachers to do that currently. So this item, when you see that it calls for 2 teachers to be seconded, our thinking is, and once again, this is just anticipating, that if we have those cases, they would be the ones coordinating that programming for those families, for those children, is what their role would be. Because right now, if we don't have some plan in place, if those families are inquiring, our position would be you either return to school or you're going to have to find a different program outside of the Creek. And we know that we don't want to lose any students. As a matter of fact, in this model that's being proposed, in the conversations I've had with Mark in particular, because this particular model would be structured and set up with Mark's department, it would support those families, is our goal would be to reintegrate those students back into the classroom. It's not a long-term plan. It's a short-term, we call it a bridge, to get those students and families feeling comfortable to get them back into school. And hopefully have all of our students return to our classrooms. So that's the idea, and it is a concept, once again, that I bring forward to you. Maybe there's other models that we could consider, but right now that's the one approach that we think might be the most doable as well, considering we would have to advertise, hire, and have these 2 individuals build a program over the summer in preparation for September 1st.
That would be K-12.
K-12. Yes.
Kelly?
So I know there's funding for homeschooling. If we did that, would the funding go to the family or to the board?
Our vision would be, what we would do is we would enroll them as a regular student.
Okay.
We would
Just
call
like
it,
a big
we would call it a home education program, but technically, yeah. So
It's a home and school program.
that's right. So if they're registered, let's say they're resident to Home Upper Elementary, we would register them there, but we would provide a homeschool program
Yeah, that's.
until such time as we can. Yeah.
I hear tons of discussion, I guess, and in the circles I'm with, they're like, if I'm gonna have to do homeschooling, I'm gonna do homeschooling and not be accountable for teacher. So they're asking me what I know about all this. Better to stay. I know my guys.
Yeah.
Tree. So even, the Google Doc that you sent out to your staff. And that was one concern that the teachers had,
Yeah.
because they couldn't walk
Yeah.
to bridges at the same
Yeah,
time.
that's a great comment. 220 teachers responded to that survey that I sent out, and that's probably, let's say 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. But still, the question was around what are their concerns moving forward in a scenario that we will enter into. And yes, the number one concern from our teachers was what you just explained, Trudy, which is having to juggle 2 programs at the same time.
Yeah.
And what we can appreciate from a teacher perspective, especially compounding the anxiety and the gaps in learning that will exist in our students when they come back in September. There's a lot for our teachers to really manage and try to support. So on top of that, you layer trying to create a home education program. Quite frankly, I know you as a board would never support putting our teachers in that position, and nor would we, because it would not be fair or reasonable as an expectation for them. And the other part of it is that, and I'm repeating myself, our goal in our communication would be, we want you back in our schools.
Yeah.
We're working with you it's a bridge, is the way we would describe it. This is not a full year program. Now, if that is the case, then we would be in a position to support it. But be honest, in our own minds, if we were to get all of our students back, or most of them, phase this out, if we had seconded teachers, then we could still deploy and use those seconded teachers in our school system. You know, as a board, you have in the past, you'll remember every year just about, maybe with the exception of last year, you've allocated additional staff. I know from a budget perspective, and that's where I'll have Roger weigh in, you know, we were in different times, but I also feel that this is obviously a very extenuating circumstance in which we will need to have a plan in place for those situations. And I'll just share this with you. A neighboring school division, I spoke with the superintendent who actually surveyed all of his families and asked around the 3 scenarios, which one would you prefer? And 75% of families responded to the survey. 80% said they will not return to school in September.
Really?
8%. 8, yeah.
You said eight.
No, 8. So if you think about that in our situation, not to say it'll be the same here, but it's an interesting number. Because could we have 5% of our families saying, don't want to return to school right away in September, but let's see how it goes, and then maybe in October,
Yeah.
I'll come back. I think that is a very likely scenario for a number of our families. That's what we anticipate.
I have Kelly and then Lucy.
Have we surveyed our parents?
We haven't, and the reason why we didn't do it, and we talked about it, is that we felt that it would make more sense to show them the plan and then ask the question. And we have actually thought about doing that next week after they see the plan and have a little bit of time. We're up against summer though, and but I mean,
They're gonna fill it out.
yeah,
This is on their mind.
it is for sure, and I mean, I think we can ask that question. But I also know that between the end of June and let's say the end of August, so much can
Can
change.
change. August
That
1st.
it'll be very difficult to even nail down the numbers.
Yeah.
That's why it's really hard. It's a moving target and it's difficult to predict.
Okay, I have Lucy. and then Troy.
So for $250,000, how many students would we need to kind of justify that? And then what happens if, like, 2 teachers? What happens if it's like 7% of Clive, 7% of McGlen, 7, then we don't even have enough, like.
So what we would do is, because it's a home education program with providing materials to parents, we feel if we could have these 2 individuals putting together those materials over the summer, it would be handing those materials over, understanding with home education, Lori, you know this very well, you teach and you assess, you do all the work, right? So these 2 individuals would be responsible for some level of monitoring and making sure that it's getting done and tracking. But at the same time, what we would see happening is that if we had a high volume, we would do the best we could under that circumstance, because understanding we can't hire 4, we can't hire 6. So we're saying probably 2 might be a minimum. And then we also would probably, to be honest, look at some of the staff in here to see if we would support to some degree the need. But it's just so difficult to predict. And I can't say to you if it's going to be 10 or 100 today.
What if it's only 3 or
Well,
5?
I think what I would say to you, and I've thought about that, we already know we're in all return or most return, we will still have some fairly large class sizes out there, which we do every September, as you know.
Yeah.
And we will always have those hotspots that we need to address. So if, let's just say, we plan for this and there's no need, we would deploy those teachers in those hotspots in schools and basically put them to work for the year and use them to support our students is what we would propose. Because the other part is in a contract and a recruitment, when you're signing a contract, you would need to have someone of high quality who says, I can commit to this because it's a year. We could do a 4-month contract, we've talked about that. Who is going to leave if they're highly skilled and capable? Who's willing to move from a position they currently have if they're within our system to take this on with the risk of not having something after Christmas?
4 months.
So it really would have to be a longer term commitment, but once again, even if we get into a scenario of a second wave, which was mentioned before, I I think about having these individuals developing and collating and putting stuff together that could assist us. Even in a school situation where there's an outbreak in a school, or a case in a school and we have to transition,
You know what,
They
even
could
that
be
might
there.
sell me.
yeah, they could have the ability to get in and support
Yeah.
like that. And so that's, now on the budget side, I'll maybe put Roger a little bit on the spot, sorry, Roger, around, what we might be anticipating because of your question around where's, and then on top of that, of course, you see a number relating to potential costs for, you know, the sanitation. You know.
Trudy had a
I
question.
just, because this is not going to be the same kind of education that the students are receiving now.
No, it
And
is.
so the parents will clearly understand that
Good
they will
point.
not get that support,
Absolutely,
that they are responsible
yes,
for their
teaching and
child's
education,
education
yes.
with some assistance.
No, thank
from Wolf Creek.
Yeah, that's
Plus,
exactly right.
then we're not counting on head counts, anymore, are we?
Just at our rolling average,
Right.
But I mean, that's
it helps us.
That's less of
Yes,
a concern
absolutely.
for having those kids start in October.
Right, correct. That's correct. If they, I mean, I think we still have to do a count at September 30th, correct, Roger, and submit that. So, but if we don't have, let's say we don't have 100 students that otherwise we would have, well, that's why we would want them registered in our schools.
You still get
Because
money
they're
for them.
they're still in our account,
Right.
right?
It's a 3-year rolling average, it's based on the projected number for next year. If those students aren't in school and registered September 30th, following year, we get the impact of not having them. So,
Okay. So it's
I'm
not
not-
as significant.
potentially not, but with this government, I guess I'm not gonna say I'm positive that they wouldn't in the fall, if we lost 100 kids, so okay, we're gonna change their number because your projection's wrong.
Right.
Like, we submit our projection for the current year to the government and they take that on at face value.
Right.
If it's, and in a normal year, it's normally gonna be pretty close, so they're probably not gonna do much, but in this particular year, if there were 100 or 200 students out, then they might.
Right, but they would be registered.
And just to extend a little bit, it's all about doing the best we can to say to a family, we want you to stay with Wolf Creek,
Yes.
and we will provide support, not maybe the full support that you've received in what you have over this time, but at least a level of support and a communication that we want to work with you to reintegrate your son or daughter into our school system.
Yes.
And let us help you do that.
Right.
And
And they will fully know.
yes, that's how we would communicate and package it, if you will.
Yeah, Lucy Kelly.
And so I guess because we're not actually starting a new program of homeschooling, it's actually in-home support, that'll be important how you brand it or whatever, because then maybe one student at my school says, no, my kid's sick, whatever, but guess what? Or I'm scared he's gonna get sick, I'm not putting him in school, but I get to do homeschooling. And I have all the supports of the school, and then my homeschooling mom is like, really? I wanna go to Wolf Creek too. Right, but it's not gonna be what that homeschooling mom thinks.
No, we will have to describe and define it
Yeah.
very clearly, because you're right, most don't understand what a true homeschooling experience is.
Right.
From a parent perspective and from a learner student perspective. So but really, we don't feel we can go beyond that because we can't make promises that we can't.
Mm,
And so will a parent potentially say, yes, I think I can take that on and do it? Maybe. In a short-term scenario over a month or two, maybe. We don't know. But we're not positioned in any way to design a fully integrated brand new program that provides that kind of enhanced teacher. I mean, you look at something like the Alberta Distance Learning Center, that's established, that offers online, you know, they have a contingent of staff and a structure that's worked for a long
But
time.
that's shutting down. huh?
They are, yeah, but I mean, that's the
And
kind
that's
of-
it,
but
set up
that's-
to
but
fail
that's-
kids
that's-
that.
Yeah, but I mean that, because I think what parents are looking for, this is what I believe, they're looking for an experience that is not one or the other. You know, but what we're looking at offering is something that is more of a bridge. That's the way we would describe it. This is a bridging program that we would offer.
Okay, Lori's losing her mind and then I'll let you.
Yeah, it comes down to choice. That's an awful thing, I think, and so parents want choice and the government wants to give them choice. And now we have Bill 15, which is choice of education. So if as a parent, you're choosing to homeschool your child, which I did, and you do the work, all I had was a facilitator that had to see me twice a year. I bought the materials, I picked the curriculum, I taught my kid, I cried, I disciplined, I had a facilitator twice a year. And then I chose whether my child wrote the Canadian Basic Skills and in grade 3, the PAT, which I chose. And then they went to the facilitator's house and wrote those. But other than that, you're on your own when you choose as a parent, when you choose to do that. So if you're choosing not to send your child to school, you're really choosing homeschool, right?
That's what we're proposing. That would be the extra option.
Because that's a
that we
lot
would-
of
we would-
money.
That we would offer next year. I mean, the other option is we can contract, like we could look at contracting a service out to another provider. I think our position always is, and I mean, maybe this is a little bit boastful. I think we can do a better job. I think we can provide better service and support than going to what you described, Lori, in your experience. But we feel that we need to have an alternative in Wolf Creek, and right now we don't. So that's the dilemma that we face.
It's just this timing and the money, and we already have struggled with our budget, right?
So with the homeschooling, and I appreciate all the stuff that's been talking about, would they be assigned a classroom? Because like, this is a short term, this is a bridge, right?
Right.
So what I know, when I feel comfortable, Johnny's gonna see Mrs. Brick. So I'm already assigned to that classroom, they're in our numbers
Yeah.
and we know.
We would
Right.
assign them to a bus.
And then it was very clear in the town hall meeting to me that we needed to have the alternative to reassure parents.
Yes.
So I think, even though it's a lot of money, I think we have to go down this road.
Yeah. there's no
Because
other
we
option.
have to give people, and some people are really, really, really scared of this.
Yeah.
Some people might be not as scared of this, and I don't know who I'd be talking about. So they aren't as worried, but if you are really scared, and where I got this, the most reality I saw about people that are scared is people who have immune
Deficient.
respiratory
Yes.
problems. Like we have a vice principal in our homeschools whose daughter has that. And when I heard her talk at a parent council meeting, that's when I thought, oh my goodness, there is so many more views than maybe mine. And so we do have to be very, very mindful. And I know that when that vice principal will feel safe for her kid, they will return to school. But because she's already had a lung cancer, all that, why wouldn't we do it? And I know it's a lot of money, so that's why, regardless of how Roger's gonna tell me how we're gonna pay for it, we're gonna figure out.
That
how
was
to
my next
support it.
question,
Yeah,
was
my
where are we
anxiety
getting the money for
Roger.
this? Where's it coming from, Roger? You got a stash?
I'll just, with my thoughts on it, I sort of agree with Kelly. I have lots of friends with kids in school right now. Some are saying, my kids have been inside since March. They're staying inside, they're not playing with friends. You know, we can't find a cohort family because people are going to the grocery store randomly, you know, like some people are those, you know, and some aren't. I've had friends say if hand sanitizer is the only thing available at the school door instead of a sink and soap and water, they won't be sending their child. You know, everybody is different. Like it's, you know,
Spectrum
everyone is
is
different.
large.
And I guess my fear sort of is, until the parents see and understand what it's gonna look like when the kids go back to school, And I guess another question that was asked is, who is high risk? We all had thought at one time people with asthma were high risk. Now Henshaw saying, no, they're not. You know, it's just, you know, those sort of things until parents get a really good understanding, until Albertans, you know, understand, until we get direction from Alberta Health Services. I would just hate to see all these people pull their kids out of school, sign up for some cyber school somewhere, and they're gone forever. Or feel like they're gone forever. People already feel, you know, feel alone
Isolated.
and
Not part of
isolated.
the community.
And if they feel like not feeling safe to send their kids to school in September is isolating them more, they're not going to send them back in December or January or next year either. And I think, you know, if we have that support there, and with the expectation that they'll return in 6 months or a year, or whatever it is, I think it just gives people a little bit of security and more reasons. So that's just my thoughts.
It's a big one.
And so Roger,
Where's the money coming from, Roger?
And we want to hear from Roger.
Yeah, let's hear it, Roger. So. Yeah, yeah, long time ago.
Far, far away.
So the board in the budget this year actually had $1 billion actually left over. So
$1 million,
970,
that's our reserves.
yeah, so we're kind of trying to maintain along that line amount. Kevin did a projection, which he said has probably changed already today, so we did that yesterday. So he's got $1.4 million additional over and above what we actually had anticipated for the current school year. So we had put 400,000 of that into our current year's budget, so that leaves $1 million there. In terms of COVID costs, like the PPE and the home,
You're guessing.
like, I mean, we know that stuff is probably gonna skyrocket for both teachers and for EAs and for potentially other staff in the schools. We've also got I think you don't know what other kind of costs. We may have caretaker costs that we have to institute daytime janitors, and then also do
Deep clean every night.
The clean is actually done better in the evenings. I mean, we're not there yet. So anyways, that's just kind of a cautionary. I mean, there is funding probably there to do this, and then maybe in the fall there's different choices. I was in the back of my mind also hoping to get some of that capital back into the mix. But I mean, having said that, losing those students totally does impact our budget for subsequent years. So, and if they're a home med on September 30th or more of a home med based program, they may change our funding anyways, but it's still funding that we can keep.
So really, our reserve is the only place that we can draw from. I mean, you can use IMR, but we have that money allocated. I mean, we've already, you know, decided not to spend money on buses.
So sorry, we actually had put 600,000 for capital. We had left that there. So, but we normally would use about 1.1 million set aside in the reserve. So we actually do have enough for, and we were putting out the tender for 4 buses for the fall because, as everybody knows, manufacturing did slow down. So we're not sure when we might get them next year. So we're trying to get our bid out sooner rather than later. So I think we do have capital going in. So I mean, my hope was to bring it up to the 1.1 million, but that's just a hope. So we delayed it now. This will be the 3rd year. So I think the subsequent year's budget, we need to make sure that that's probably one of the priorities, but we'll better at that point in time. The IMR that they mentioned, so think that might have been misinterpreted incorrectly by some. It's not to buy PPE stuff, it's not to buy staffing. They haven't given that approval. It's to maybe put a sink in a washroom, or a sink in a classroom. that you can
Oh,
wash
of
your
course
hands
it
in.
is.
So,
Okay.
because that's
Yeah, yeah.
attached to the building,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
as you all know, we did get permission to use some of our IMR money this past year to do that, but that wasn't reported into
Okay,
subsequent
that
years
makes sense.
to date.
Yeah.
But they may do that because there are boards that aren't gonna have, I mean, I'm gonna say, most boards will have a surge generated out of this school year. If they actually take it away, then we're in tough shape.
Well, and I would be prepared to make that motion for this. But we're not the only ones, right?
No, no.
There's 61 other school boards that are in the same boat. So maybe something positive might come out of it. Or we'll all go down in flames.
6 months is a Mickey boat.
I just clarify one, Roger, just to be clear, so you said there's potentially an additional 1.4 million
He's spending it already.
over and above.
He missed some money now, those wheels are turning.
So there's potentially 1.4 of additional carry forward dollars out of this year's budget into next year's budget, in addition to the $1 million that was projected by the board as an operational reserve.
Yeah, so we had,
2.4 million.
we had $1 million, but we'd already planned on spending 400,000 on that 1.4. So basically $2 million,
2 million.
roughly, but
So double the operational reserve that you had projected in your spring budget.
Oh, spend it.
that's not what I was sharing.
Running camera without Roger. I mean, Jason,
Next time we'll agree.
sorry, your best laid effort.
You know that.
So, and schools are actually probably looking at their budget and spending their dollars now. So I mean, it may be smaller, but I don't think it'll be significantly small. Although with our transportation budget being up higher, I kind of said, if we keep buying our tires for next year this year.
Do it quick.
Get it done now.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any questions, comments, or like to make a motion?
Judy already.
So Trudy, I need that motion. Okay. So was there any more comments?
Was that motion?
Right.
Yeah.
So all those,
Exactly.
Reluctantly, we're gonna approve it.
so all those in favor of Trudy's motion?
With a heavy heart.
Thank you.
But that's a reluctant, right? That's a very angry, yes, to it.
Yeah.
Gave them choice. That was a gun to my head.
Yeah.
Just in
Yeah.
case you're wondering.
Well, I'm feeling the same way.
Yeah.
But I like your plan, and I think it gives safety for those people that have.
Community too.
Because now you have the summer to. find
Yeah,
out,
well, yeah.
Advertise.
We'll get on, we need to get on it right away.
Are we reducing, sorry. Are we reducing your teaching staff at all right now? Like with the
From this
people
year going
you,
into
yeah,
next year?
when you said, are there people that might be losing jobs that would be?
No, I think the overall teacher allocation
It
did go down by
5.
5, and I think as a board, there were how many were added, because there was some, we added some last fall.
Oh, yeah, right. So there was about 2 added in the fall, did that last 5
Yeah.
months. So
Technically, nobody's losing their job
Yeah,
teaching right now.
with attrition and retirements, correct. Technically, yes.
I know.
Yeah, it's not the case in other, as well,
Yes.
probably in
I
other
hear that.
districts, but. we'll agree.
And this is totally out of order, but I'm so happy we were keeping it in our guide.
Yes.
You know, because we heard other boards weren't, or they had to move them. Yeah. So that's.
Okay, 5.17 is board retreat, which is on,
You missed
oh,
it.
5.16, sorry. Virtual town hall meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that those trustees that attended the virtual town hall meeting receive per diem.
All right. Was there any comments, questions? I believe that was, 4.25. It was about an hour. So, yeah.
I was there with the SBA.
So, was there any more discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Great. Thank you. 5.17 is board retreat. So the board retreat is set for October the 7th.
Six,
6th.
9 to 5.
So we have the board review on there. I think some other agenda items have been added throughout the year, like Chuck.
I don't think we did.
So is there some agenda items that you would like to add? So board review would be one.
The website.
The website.
You guys won't like this.
Yeah, we said we would.
Okay.
Do you want?
Succession planning. All right.
I imagine if we don't have any other hot topics, probably a PR session to kind of focus for the year where we want to try to
Like
set our
advocacy. at the bottom.
advocacy, yeah.
Okay. So that's everything. So someone want to make a motion that those items are added to our board retreat agenda? Lori. all
I would
those
so
in
move.
favor? Thank you. 5.18 is in regards to writing a letter to Kevin. David.
Duck.
David Duck.
David Duck. David Duck.
You're right, David, not Kevin.
I like that.
I would make a motion that a letter be sent to Mr. David Duck on behalf of the board.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. 5.19 is an ESDA questionnaire. So, question 1
I would have no, I'm sorry.
is, what questions does your school board still have related to provincial school reentry plan? So they're pretty broad questions. Are there any aspects of the plan that remain?
Well, that's not been clear, we just disagreed with it. That was very clear.
And then the next one is, what will be your biggest challenge in meeting the requirements of the school reentry plan? How does ASBA support you through the reentry process? And what is your local board currently doing to build relationships with MLAs? What is working well? What can be improved? So would we like to work on question 1 first?
Yeah,
So what questions does your board still have related to the provincial school reentry? So I think there has been questions about screening requirements. Jason, do you still believe that? Screen reporting?
Yeah, I would say screening for symptoms. I would say it would be great to have some kind of electronic system developed that's province-wide. Would be my suggestion.
That keeps from you having,
It has a consistent way of having parents reply or respond to it and have that information come into our school system so it's easily accessible and viewable.
I think if we just put about what the screening requirements are, right? What do you guys? I do think that that's, and I think there's lots of, you know, I don't think everybody.
I have to open it up because I can't even think if I can't look at the question.
So you think of just
I think we
requirements?
just
or
need
requirements?
more.
I think we need
I don't
more
know.
clarity on
Email,
the president
requirements.
email. I don't think we have
I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah, I don't have
it. I think she just got it today.
Can you send it, please? I'm having a hard time concentrating.
Well, two emails and I didn't think it's.
Let me see now if we are shut. There we go.
What? What's that? Did you get it? Yeah, I just wanted to. Okay, I found them. What questions does your board still have related to provincial school reentry plan?
We'll
Those-
send it to everybody.
I'm doing it.
There's 4 questions, right?
Okay, it's coming.
I found it.
Now, one question I have is, they don't talk about how it's gonna be okay, like, they need to promote more of the tracking, tracing, sorry, wrong word, and that, what are they doing to assure people it's safe, that we're not all carriers, right? Because they've promoted this so much that if you're at all scared and you like to do this, if they can't settle down, and I know just working with some key people in my church, they are so scared. They are so scared to even let them outside. So I'm just saying, how are they, just the fact that they're opening sports up to play, they're opening pools up, it's telling me that they are feeling fairly safe. So what are they gonna do for the mental health of people, the average Joe who's capable in a reentry plan?
And you know, that was something that came up in the World Cafe discussion at that last zone board meeting, was that we need some good news. We need something to hang on to carry us, you know, into the future, being hopeful, or I don't know what else, but you know, to be hopeful, yeah.
That we made it,
Good news,
that we're on the road.
good stories.
To recovery. We're gonna be all right.
But they don't talk about it. You never hear Henshaw say, but I guess that's unfair. We do hear, like, our numbers are surprising.
So what she says now is how many people have recovered instead of how many people have, right? Yeah. So that's their.
And no deaths to report on a number of days now. She's not gonna be reporting as often now.
Yeah, that's really good. I think she needs.
Yeah.
Good news stories.
So, so what questions does your board still have related to provincial school reentry? I
Which
think
one
it's-
is it?
I think one needs to, like, who's, maybe it goes back to screening, like, if they're saying the parents are responsible for it,
Then the school doesn't have to worry about it.
do we have to track it if it's a parent's responsibility?
No.
So, it's just clarity on that, right? And,
Are you writing this down, Jason?
I am.
Okay. Good thing somebody is.
Yep. The other, if I may just expand on that, one of the challenges our transportation system comes around, there's requirements around loading and unloading of students off the bus and trying to take precautions, but yet logistically, it's virtually impossible. So like that would be an example, one of the guidelines
Yeah.
that is an expectation, but in practical terms, it's virtually impossible for us to do it the way that it's currently written. So I think just,
How do they have, if they want you to do it?
they actually, well,
They want you to maintain the spacing, but also they want the first families on, the back,
Oh.
your way up, but then the bus stops at 3 different schools, so those kids are all by.
What about ladders, just like hook on the windows and you just scoot them up?
yeah, so just, I think, I think the question is just around the bringing it in clear. I think it's just, to be honest, just the transportation guidelines
Yeah, even just that simple.
and the logistics.
Yeah, and then just right about, just 'cause they're the first one on, doesn't even get off at the same school.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
they need to understand that, because sitting in a boardroom making these guidelines sound really good, but implementing them is way harder.
I mean, and you also, they want families to sit together, so it might be a grade one or
With a
back.
grade 12.
Yeah, and maybe by the end of that time frame, grade one is a little bit back.
All these other grade levels.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the case, but I mean, probably not, I think you're probably still in elementary school first,
Maybe.
but you may be going to the Catholic school last, in our
You
case.
got
and
little
you
Catholic
may have
kid has to put up
all
with all their,
Yeah, so
right?
whereas, so it makes it very difficult to, I mean, they say, it sounds easy, but.
Yeah.
So it's a good question.
Was there any other questions for that one?
No.
What will be your biggest challenge in meeting the requirements of school?
Transportation.
What was yours?
Transportation,
Oh, okay.
social distancing.
Funding.
See, yeah, that's true.
They don't want to hear about money.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it already said it's
PPP
your
supply
problem.
and demand.
I know, but I think they still need to hear it, again, because they're only giving you so much money, you know.
They don't claw that.
Well, and so again, don't take what we have saved or take it away because we're obviously gonna spend it, I think that's what you have to say.
But just getting it, procuring it.
Yes,
And the use of it. Masks are not easy to wear for children. Masks
That's what
are
they say.
all over in parks and on the street, in the garbages, they're just all.
Well, they're not recommended.
they're not recommended.
But did you read what what's supposed to do if you have somebody sick? Put the kid in an infirmary with a mask. Right? I'm sick, so now I
Well,
want to.
every student have to take a mask to school. Is that on the school supply list?
I didn't see that, but
No, we can be.
If I can just add a number two, I think one of, and it's been mentioned, it's just anxiety.
yes,
It's just
Yes.
anxiety and
mental health,
and concerns around general safety.
yeah.
Parents, staff.
I think with those questions, they're gonna bounce you to the mental health. Yeah, but that's, because they phone the 1-800 number, right? I just think they need to give people clarity and, because clarity is the biggest.
We need to be reassured.
Yeah.
We do. It's okay.
And so the last one is, what is your local boards currently doing to build relationships with families?
We invite him to,
What is working well?
But right now, during the pandemic, they
There
don't do
is
anything.
two, with Jason being a minister, it's really hard to, I can reach out personally, but it's, tough to, it's not on board stuff, so. Not on board stuff,
Or even general.
Says he's coming and doesn't. I mean,
But
that's just like,
when they're a minister, when they're,
that's life.
that's just what happens, right? So,
We're not
But
doing.
even at zone 4, the education, the represent, the rep,
Alberta Ed Rep.
right, Alberta head rep, wasn't coming.
but that's how MLAs, so
Yeah.
that's Alberta, and that was because of the election. The government stuff, so.
One great example is when you, Paul General spoke with Ron, and then he went back and was able to address the infrastructure, the size of the Black Ball School.
Yeah.
Mm.
That was
So
very
that
good.
was, I mean, I think that worked well, so you.
He is a worker.
Yeah.
He tries.
So what, we could just say what worked well for
Yeah.
us is,
Yeah.
you know,
Bobby,
building a
our
personal.
MLA, and he went to bat for us.
But I do think, you know, you know, we do have to encourage ASB in that if we are meeting in Edmonton again to hold something for MLAs, I think it's important, especially if we can get some of the ministers there. Because I honestly, I haven't spoken to Jason since.
He's a busy guy. I'm seeing him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And our MLAs have been invited to any kind of virtual grad parade or any kind of activity that's going on, I'm assuming.
Don't even get me started on that.
Just asking.
I actually had to call her out on that at her tone at spring general meeting, bash in CBE, like that's not the place. Just her address, I found it just really off. And then that letter, boards don't plan. I said, Adrian, you can boards don't plan.
We don't even get invited.
Yeah, she said, Lauren, she said, there's some boards I'm just really disappointed in.
Well,
They
use a
uninvited.
shotgun, don't use.
Yeah. Oh, I was mad. Anyways, but yeah.
Number 3, did we cover number 3?
We did. We're good.
Okay.
Well, how can the ASBA report
Or
it?
whatever you want.
I'll respond on your behalf.
Or do.
Censored.
Yeah. And not, what is it, moist?
Moist. Yeah,
Sorry.
The next item. Is, I just received a couple emails, so one is, sorry, I'm like adding this. because The student transportation task force,
That's a road trip schedule.
so, Alberta Education has assembled a student transportation task force. With Tricia Estabrooks as the ASB rep. They'll be meeting across the province over 2.5 weeks. It's a great opportunity for local trustees or smaller transportation providers to attend information sessions and share their thoughts. So, July the 7th is in Red Deer. That would be the closest to here, I believe. Lucy?
I'd make a motion that our superintendent and designate or and as well as the board chair attend the Tuesday, July 7th Transportation Task Force meeting thing.
How do I find out where they are?
The schedule attached to calendar. What is it?
Where they are new available.
You have any idea what I have?
Well, I have a list, but it doesn't, the one I'm looking at, or what my computer's opening, it just shows some dates, days and times, it doesn't say where.
It's a different. But I would think that Ron Merrick and Betty Clark might be good people to go on that, because they deal with it every day. As opposed to a trustee who does not, whatever, and I know that you didn't include trustees, but, and I guess you could put that under your designate.
but are they off?
No, they're not on work, but I think one is on holidays. We bet he is.
But this road trip is to collect data, but also there has to be someone that's willing to say something. about it.
Yeah.
Bureaucrats can't. So that's why the board chair needs to go.
Yeah.
Or whoever.
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah.
I'm around that day, but I honestly, when I'm looking at that, I can't find the information on it.
I'm not seeing either.
Well, there's just the date, July 7th is Red Deer. Are you looking for like Capri
Just like
Hotel
looking
or
up
address
Red
or
Deer.
something? I'm thinking they must
I'll
be
send it out.
sending
So
out.
It says Red Deer, Red Deer Octane Company.
Oh, yeah.
Tuesday, July 7th, Red Deer.
So I'll put a record that.
Grand Prairie, Peace River, Edmonton, Fort McMurray.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll send it out.
And then,
Doesn't even say.
Because Vivian sent this out, and she got it from Nathan, and I think that's all Nathan, the chair of the task force, has at this time.
and then I also received. Oh, JUPA, an update on JUPA.
Did you vote on that last?
Oh, yes, would you, all those in favor of Lucy's motion?
Thank you. I don't think JUPA has to be dealt with right now.
It's not, it won't be.
Right? So I don't think this should be on.
The government has said, see ya.
Joint agreements, yeah.
Well,
Well, this is not even on the agenda, so.
Okay, well, I'll forward it off, but they said they are now required.
yeah, we knew, well, we're working on it.
You did send it to us.
3 years from
Yeah.
like this year, as opposed to having to be done this year.
Correct. And so there's the trustee reports there.
Good job.
Good job,
You
Trudy.
rock.
Yo!
Oh, shoot, I was gonna do that organization.
ASBA zone poll. Is there any more information?
I don't think so, no, because we've had a meeting since our last zone four meeting. Yeah, I have nothing to tell you, I have nothing right now.
Were they gonna meet in the summer?
Well, I've just been reviewing a whole bunch of emails, and aren't we still gonna do, I don't know, because I've been paying attention to Pam and not
Because we'll have, if we are, like September would have been our, that's right, term to host. And we certainly can't host.
No, no, and I think the last conversation was we would see, again, how the stages went. And then when it was your school board's turn, then it would be our school board's responsibility to have the screen. And then really, it's easier if everybody has their own computer like we did. But if it's still in Zoom, then we don't even have to worry about it. Right?
I did register for that government session next Friday from Glenn Ross.
Oh, thanks for the reminder.
It's 1 hour and it's free.
Yeah, I will know.
I thought it was today.
No, it's the 25th.
Oh,
All right, and 7.2 is PSBA aid, right? Did you have anything?
I don't have anything else that we already talked about.
7.3 was the facilities report.
9 broken windows.
oh,
Yeah.
isn't that something? Yeah.
Warm weather, right?
And stealing tools.
They read that.
I was on Pinoka.
Same time the truck was stolen.
The truck was stolen?
Transportation trucks
From where?
from this, from the Pinoka shop. Yard.
Not down at the.
So did they hotwire or what?
Well, it was in 1995, so it's
Easy.
Been around a
Ford.
while.
and it actually, I think it didn't even need a key to start.
Yeah.
You paid
Had a
extra for that.
screwdriver in the ignition.
But the tools, they actually had to break into the van to get the tools, so he never even noticed that because he went to do something else that day and didn't use the van, so that it was actually when they noticed the truck was stolen. When he got back.
Enough.
Right, and then thank you. Assuming there's anything else on that report? The safety and wellness report.
I just want, so facilities is just going, like Kevin and Matt and Andy with the COVID as well. But even with the CMR stimulus and the
Oh, yeah,
IMR that
yeah.
we're currently doing. And I think the schools being around and looking through things, I think they've got a number of new work orders.
Of
as well.
course.
So they're just, those will go right now, so they're hoping to there's some calm, but we've got 3 tender, we've had the roofing tender was out, we've got the controller tender out. And, they're working on getting the lights, the LED retrofit the schools. Well, we did the west side schools with the Johnson controls.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, sorry, they're doing great. I'm very stressed, I think.
Yeah.
All right,
Here it is.
and 7.5 is the transportation report. Lots of information.
Lots of information.
He is
He's done a good job. He's been busy.
Is he liking it still?
I think he's liking it more now than when he started. That was quite a steep learning
I
curve,
imagine.
and he's learning fast. So getting the school perspective on some of the things that that we didn't kind of even realize before, or that he actually didn't realize with transportation. He did with
Yeah.
administrators. I think it was a great move. Hopefully it's in the.
All right, well, that, I think, with that, we will adjourn the meeting, but I just want to thank all the staff for all the busy, crazy times you've been doing, trying to keep everyone safe and happy, and healthy, and I hope everyone has a great summer.
Well, thanks to all of you.
I don't know.
And you want time sheets?
Oh, yeah.
So we aren't here till August something. 20, no, I forget the date of that. 17?
What day is that?
August 19th.
No, we changed it. 19th.
19th of August. Nothing. June.
17th.
Oh, 19th, you're right.
Wednesday.
Yeah, you're right.
Ew. Thank goodness someone's going to go.
What'd you write down, Brent?
For August?
Yeah.
19th at 9 a.m.
Yes. I was hoping it was 4:30, I should try it out. Is it really 5 or is it like 4:53?